changed how we
Kind of know it.
Special minutes. The Zoom meeting has to be posted on 10 days after the meeting. I would think the draft
Doesn't really grasp some of the details of like what's really happening behind the scenes. Yeah. Wait, some of it. Yeah, that kind of makes it really good.
I understand.
Especially with two judges coming on board. I'm sure they'd be up for
But
it.
I looked
We
at
used to do it with Oshkosh Correctional, but I feel like it's been quite some time because I haven't
I don't
talked to them recently.
kind of confused.
The OCI is like one of the most surprising bits. Their eyes are like, they're like, wow. Never.
All right, it is 6 o'clock and we're gonna call to order. Hello. Okay, so with that, we'll begin the agenda. Item number 2, consideration of minutes for April 4th, 2022. Actually, I'm so sorry to put you on the spot. I know I was talking with Cassie about this. Since no one here was a part of that committee and it's no longer a standing committee, are we able to do anything with the minutes?
We did speak with Mary Ann about that. And it was our understanding since that committee is gone and there are no other members, it would be your committee's responsibility
To approve.
She thought perhaps it would have been best if you guys had viewed them so that you would have be able actually be able
Right, and
to.
it was in the packet, so.
Okay, so that was her recommendation. Okay.
Okay, so with that, I'm gonna ask for a motion to approve minutes for April 4th, 2022, Emergency Management Committee.
So move.
And a second, any discussion? With that, all in favor, say yes or A.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed, nay? All right, that passes. All right, so we're gonna close item number 2. Item number 3, consideration of minutes for May 18th, 2022, Judiciary and Public Safety Committee meeting. Minutes for the May 18th JPS meeting. Great, do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that carries unanimously. Now, do we have Paul Eisen on the line? We do, okay. Oh, I can see him.
Yes, you are.
What's that?
The mute himself.
Right. Paul, can you hear us? Well, okay, you need to unmute. We can't hear you. Yep. Yeah, okay. Paul, sorry if you could, if you could hear us, we can't actually hear you. I'm very sorry. Okay, well, we'll just continue then. Hopefully you can hear us. Okay, we're going to close item 3 and open item 4. Public comments on the agenda items. Do we have anyone from the public who would like to comment? If you do, please give us your name and address. And if you're on Zoom and would like to have a comment, please raise your Zoom hand.
I would, but I don't need to go first. I'll wait until someone else.
I think you can go.
Okay. Do you need to stand or is this?
Please.
Okay. So I just have a couple of questions or comments about the amendments to the section 22 for the committee meeting. There's been a lot of questions about what some of it are. All meetings we specify what kind of building. Are we talking about a county facility? Are we talking a lot of confusion among department heads who are trying to figure out how these meetings need to be handled. And I know Mary Ann's here and there's other people who are going to talk on it, but that's one concern that a lot of us have is what does it mean? And then educational events, again, I know there's a lot of, I was speaking with one department who holds educational events for his staff, and sometimes he'll invite a county board supervisor to attend. But it's not really an educational session for the board or for a standing committee, it's for his department, but he wants his. So, I mean, are those something that you guys are anticipating? So there's a lot of questions about what some of these. And again, I understand you guys got a lot of great ideas. We got a lot of new board members that are very excited and want to make some changes. If we could have all sat down and kind of worked through some of these things together with people that are actually doing some of this stuff, that might have gone a little smoother. So I'm just hoping you can get a little bit more clarification on what some of these stuff.
Absolutely. I think we will be addressing that during that agenda item. If we don't, I will be sure to ask.
Perfect. Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Were there any other comments here in the conference room or on Zoom from the public? Yeah, I'm sorry, Paul, we still can't hear you.
Point of information, Mr. Chairman, can we, on a note card or something, and show it to him?
On you.
Yeah, please, let's try that. There it is.
I said that.
Oh, we got you, Paul. We have you.
I'm at the mercy of technology.
All right. Okay, if we don't have any additional conversation for public, we will close item 4 on the agenda. And I'm going to then open item 5. And these are more comments on 2 specific areas. The first is within Robert's Rules of Order, which is my favorite new thing to learn about. And we're making progress. I'm not going to say I'm perfect. I'm far from it. However, we're trying to improve, and we have a fair amount of people who are new as well to this committee, as well as to the board, who maybe not have had a lot of experience, practical experience in Robert's Rules. So with that, there are a few things that I'd like to suggest for this committee. It is something that actually was started by Supervisor Cox at PNF. And it's actually listed in the Wisconsin Counties Association handbook that we got, which I thought was a really good practice. So I'm going to ask if we could try this. And basically it is when we introduce a motion versus saying so moved or just saying, yeah, okay, I got that motion, that we recite the motion title. That way we all know what we're talking about. And from notes point of view, from minutes, it'll be very clear what we're focused on. So I'm not going to be a very, I'm not going to stop the conversation because we didn't follow that specific thing. You know, it's going to be a learning process. But I think it's a good approach and a good habit to get into. So I will also try to do that. I know I'm one who doesn't really thrive in that kind of structure. However, I think that would be very helpful all around. So I'm going to just ask if we could try to do that. That'd be fantastic. The second is a comment on open records compliance. And this is another one of those things, again, for especially a lot of the new people. It's a very interesting environment that you have to kind of constantly be thinking about. And so there are a couple of questions I had, and Mary Ann was very kind in kind of helping me. And then she actually shared some of that with this team. And I want to make sure that the members got the email, and then I'll explain very briefly what the email was. And this was new to me, but it was a reminder of quorums, which it's more of, well, okay, no, it is definitely a science, but there's a little bit of art to it as well. And you're getting into, and I know you'll correct me if I'm wrong, Mary Ann, but you're getting into a little gray area, probably forum-ish area, when a supervisor contacts each of us individually to advocate for something that's on the agenda, resolution-wise, or something that potentially would even be on the agenda for the vote. If that happens, that's actually a quorum of sorts. So just to make sure that we're all understanding that if someone does contact you and me and you individually, that's still, you're not getting around the quorum. That's still a quorum. And if that happens, I would just recommend that you let them know, listen, I can't really engage in this way. What are the ways? Because that'll be the question you'll get, right? They can come to a session like this and express their opinion on it. That's actually, I think, how we would encourage that. Come to the session during the public comments or even during that agenda item. If there's passion, I'm not going to stand in the way of someone speaking. That's probably the ideal way to make that happen. So I just want to make sure that we're all aware of that, especially since a lot of us, this is brand new, other than Supervisor Eisen and Supervisor Dufferding. This is kind of new territory for a lot of us. So I just thought I would reinforce that.
I request to speak, Mr. Chairman.
Please do.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I may or may not have ingested and digested all that you said. But my comment in respect to Robert's rules is that it is a universal system that organizations follow. And I would recommend, I would suggest that it follows, as well as the county and its other committees, commissions, and boards. Furthermore, it is I don't want to have to say tradition, but it has been the custom for the county board committees, commissions, and boards to permit individuals to speak and designate that at the beginning of the meeting, but not after, except situations where contribution from an attendee. There are organizations, for example, the city of Menasha permits people to comment, or at least they did when I last attended their meetings.
I have to.
Meeting, but
I'm so sorry.
Issues that were discussed.
I'm so sorry. You're hanging up, so we're not catching all what you're saying. Well, it's part of it's the technology. You're hanging up, so we're only getting about a quarter of what you're saying, unfortunately.
The camera.
Well, I'm struggling with 2 hearing aids and
Will he see it?
caravan, which is very noisy. The interior noise is high. So you'll forgive me. I'll listen and try to contribute.
No, I think his wife's trying.
Yeah, his wife. He's in the passenger seat. Okay, Paul, I don't know if you can hear me now, but we're not really catching you because the technology is hanging up. So we're only getting about 10%. You got a lot of freezing going on. You must be in a spotty area for phone coverage. So, okay, we're gonna, I'm sure, yeah. Okay, with that, we will close item 5 and move to item 6. Communications shared by committee members. I just have 2 things to talk about really quick. The first is last meeting, we talked about establishing a committee structure workshop, right? Part of that is I'm working with, or I'm trying to coordinate schedules with some individuals from the county executive's office to kind of help facilitate that, some subject matter experts. Still trying to find out time that's available for these individuals to come. And again, this is just a workshop. This is for us to sit down and kind of just rinse through. But I believe that we need people who have actual education and experience in this versus just us sitting in a room and going through, some good stuff. So I'm hoping that we can get that scheduled sometime in July or August. The plan is once I've identified some time for them, I'm going to reach out to this committee and identify some time that would work. But that probably will not be until next week, just knowing my schedule as well as coordinating with these individuals. So I just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. I will also do an update next week at county board, so everyone knows what's going on with that. And the last one, actually, you know what? I will ask Sheriff when he's up for his sheriff's report. So that's all I had there. Any other committee?
I have a couple things. Yeah, so a couple weeks ago, the National Counties Association Judiciary Public Safety Committee had their monthly call. And there was a couple of people that just spoke at that monthly call. One of them was, let's see here, we've got Dr. Elizabeth Falcon, who serves as the CEO and president of Falcon Correctional and Community Services, and is also a corporate partner of the National Counties Association. And she's recognized as a mental health expert that has spent years working to elevate the nation's mental health in local jails and prisons. And she spoke a bit about the gaps in services and what can be done to alleviate some of those gaps in services, and conducted specific training to reduce recidivism for those that are incarcerated. And then there was also a professor from George Mason University that spoke spoke a little bit about just the infrastructure of behavioral mental health, and for those that are incarcerated, and trying to connect to those that have been involved in the criminal justice system to local mental health services. And there's been several studies that have, that Dr. Faye Taxman has been posted. I could certainly provide links if anyone's curious on that. The National Counties Association's Judiciary Public Safety Committee will be meeting again at the annual conference in Adams County, Colorado. And that's going to be July 20th to 24th. I will be attending because I'm part of the committee. So I just wanted to make that announcement. One other thing too is I would like to move agenda item 13 on the agenda, move it to after number 7. Simply because we have Jonathan Shar on the Zoom call right now. I don't want him to be sitting around for an hour while we go through our meeting. So he can provide his presentation, and then we can go about the rest of it. So I would like to.
What motion are you making?
I'm going to make the motion to move item 13 to after item 7 on the agenda.
We have a second. Any discussion to moving that? Okay. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Okay, that passed. So now, item 13, yeah, I'm just kidding. I'm just be 1 second. Item 13 will now be new item 8. Okay, Jacob.
Just 3 things that I have kind of local goings on. June 25th, the 4-H will be hosting a drive-through grilled cheese breakfast at Lemke's Family Farm in the morning. Also on the 25th is the AERC wheelchair wash. And the county executive is involved in that. Can't make it this year. So if anyone would like to go and help out, it's a great volunteer opportunity. I'll be there. That is at J&R Auto in downtown Oshkosh. And then also on June 14th, Oshkosh City Council will be meeting to discuss a proposal to replace the Jackson Street Bridge. That bridge is currently stuck in the up position because of a gear tooth failure, and that will need to be replaced in one way or another relatively quickly. They're discussing putting in a fixed span as opposed to a drawbridge. And so that committee meeting will take place on June 14th. That's all.
Anything for you? Okay. All righty. So with that, we're going to close item 6 and move to item 7 on the agenda, brief overview from department heads for their department. And again, this is a very brief few minutes discussion on the department, what their objectives are, what's going on, just so this new board can quickly assimilate and understand you and your department a little bit better. And so with that, we're going to start with Register of Deeds. Natalie? And Natalie, before you start, I just want to make, oh, you can come up, I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that you know who we are, right? So. Oh. Okay.
You're the one that you're, okay. That's the
Yes.
one I didn't know.
Oh, okay. Thought you were going to keep us in suspense.
No, I wouldn't do that. Information.
Okay, just briefly here, trying to go over the office things. The Register of Deeds office is an elected position, but it's also a very important position. The responsibilities of the Register of Deeds office are set by state statute. So almost all our fees, all our rejections that we do with papers and everything are all set by state statute. So we're just basically following what is set into law that we have to enforce. The functions of the office are extremely important. We seem like a small office that doesn't do much, but the sheet that you guys have will show all the offices that we affect, which, I mean, with banks and attorneys, county clerk, treasurer, property lister. I mean, a lot of stuff all comes through the papers that we take in our office. So people think that because we're a small office that there isn't that much, but it goes right on to define our records for the property tax case. That all comes through our documents that we take in. So we're a very detail-oriented office. Some people get a little upset with that when we say, well, why didn't you record something while you're not meeting the statutory requirements? And so you sort of got to explain some of it to them. Probably 95% of the attorneys and other people are thankful that we call them with a question. You've got that small percentage that think they overrule us and just record it. And then that leaves it up to the courts to decide if there's going to be anything else. The Register of Deeds office is not on the levy when it comes to budget time. And then I don't know if you guys heard this from before, but the Register of Deeds Association put a really nice video together about what our office is all about. And the link at the bottom here has the video. So it explains it from how we became the Register of Deeds office to forward, and that explains a lot about the office. We basically handle all the real estate and vital records. Again, the fees are all set by state statute. One new thing that's coming forward is starting July 1st, marriage records can be done through, the licenses can be done in any county. The marriage certificate or worksheet that comes in can come into any county now, not just Winnebago County for Winnebago County residents. So that makes it much more convenient for everyone. It can also take away money and also give money to certain counties. So we'll have to see how that works out. The other concern that we're watching really closely is, I don't know if you know anything about Daniel's Law in other states. This is where a judge's son was killed. So that's why they called it the Daniel's Law. So they're looking at protecting elected official judges and everything from the public records. There are some counties or some states that have very poor statutes covering them, which is really hard for the Register of Deeds office to do. So we are actually trying to be ahead of the schedule and deal with some attorneys and try to draft something to go to the states that will work for Wisconsin, because especially now that we just had 2 incidents in Wisconsin last week. And a former judge, and then
I know the former judge, I'm not sure what the second one.
That's the same question. What was the second? I
the
heard
second one, Supreme Court, or one of the court ones that would just had someone outside his house
Oh,
with a
there's one
knife.
in DC.
Oh, with Kavanaugh.
Kevin, yeah.
Oh, yeah, Chief, not Chief, but Justice Kavanaugh.
Yeah, so those are things that it's just like going to bring this to Wisconsin quicker than planned on.
Okay.
So, but it's something, if anyone hears anything about it, please let us know. Because we want to make sure that it's written so that the county doesn't end up with fines regarding how this is done.
Okay.
So we want to make sure we're trying to stay in front of it, be proactive to make sure everything is done correctly. So that's one of the main things that we've been watching very closely. It seems to be coming faster than we planned on. I don't know, as far as budget wise, I don't really have anything that's coming up major this year. Right now, I am working on what's called integrity. It takes the tax parcel number, the address, and the legal. Our office talks legal, the public talks addresses, the property lister talks tax parcel numbers or PIN numbers, is to have a triangle to put these all together to link them. So it's easier for us to find and help people when they call for us. I have 123,000 entries to go through, and I just got them last week. So it's a long process to go through and time consuming, but I think when it's done and we go forward adding all the documents in, it'll be really nice for the public once we get working on it. So that's our major additional project that we're working on besides our daily ones. Is there any other questions you might have for our office?
I got one. How would a Daniel's Law that's passed in Wisconsin, how would that interact with the open meetings laws that we have and the other open government statutes that we have to abide by on the county level?
Well, I'm not sure how the open records would be with that. I just know, like with our office, if someone records their documents and someone's trying to do a title search, there's got to be a way to we can't take them out of the records, but cover them that a title company would be able to sign some waiver to be able to get to them, so they can still do their title search, but not let the general public see it or go to tax listing or the GIS system and find out where they live. So because everything used to be more just paper in our office and everything's now connected to all the different departments, what happens in our office can be found really easily in some other office with a link. So that's why we want to make sure we're upfront with trying to make sure we have it covered for our Wisconsin when and if it goes through. I shouldn't say what if, I'm sure it will go through, it's just a matter of when.
Right.
But I'm not sure about the.
No worries.
I think maybe Mary Ann might have an answer.
I do not know the specifics of Daniel's law, but I would assume when it does get passed, it would involve redacting the information from Natalie's records. So then,
And it's a matter of if, how it's redacted, where that information comes from, how it gets to us. You know, do they provide us with the information that they want us to take out of our records?
and that's what they're,
That's what we're trying to figure out. Yeah, because if someone just says, I'm elected official, because sometimes some states are even getting down to teachers. All their stuff needs to be redacted. Well, something new comes in, you're not going to have a list of every single person that you're trying to redact. And if one thing gets out there by accident, it's,
well, the judiciary is a set group. That might be a little bit easier.
so, but it keeps on expanding every year in a lot of states. So.
Do you know,
we'll just have to see.
do you know a web address for Daniel's law that we can write down? Would it be just like Daniel's, do you know a web address so that we can look up Daniel's law?
In the back of my head, I thought it might have been a woman judge from New Jersey.
Yeah,
Oh, where her son was killed?
yeah.
Yes,
And the son's name was Daniel.
that's right.
That's where the name came through.
Right.
So, but it did start in another state. It's just eventually will get to Wisconsin. I think there's like, I want to say 6 or 8 states that now have it, but it seems like a lot of them are more pushing through. And again, there's some really good ones and some really bad ones out there.
Not yet, nothing. Not
So I just, if anyone hears about it, that we can tune into to make sure we stay on the front end of it.
Good to know.
Good. So.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah,
can I intersperse a comment?
please do.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Register of Deeds, Natalie Strohmeyer, has over 30 years of service as in the Register of Deeds office, both in Outagamie and Winnebago County. And her department is one department that brings a profit to the county. So my advice for the committee is to treat her good.
I do have a question.
Sounds good. Thank you, Paul.
One big thing obviously is cybersecurity. And that was a big topic. That was actually kind of the main topic at the last Wisconsin Counties Association in regards to just how easy it is to actually, access information on a county website. And so I guess my question to you is, has there been any recent major upgrades in regards to cybersecurity? Are there any gaps that you see that that you would need assistance on?
At the present moment, no. Our software provider stays right on top of all that stuff. They go to Perea, they check everything out. And then our IS department has told me that that's technically their job to make sure that stuff is covered. And so every time we do any upgrade or anything, we always go through IS and make sure everything's okay before we do anything, just to make sure we're always covered. And when we see anything that looks unusual, we always call the IS department right away and our software provider, just to make sure we have everything covered.
Okay. That's good to know. I mean, the demonstration that was brought at the Wisconsin Counties Association showed just how easy it is to hack into a county website just by surfing Facebook or LinkedIn, things like that. So that was always a concern that I had, that I just carried along with me in regards to Winnebago County, because you have access to all of this information, and that's a lot of
it's a lot of data. Yes, it is, and I'm very cautious of anything that we put out, that we always make sure we have secure sites and backups and stuff like that. So,
okay.
Not saying nothing's ever going to happen, but the more you give details, the more they learn about it also.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. And to Supervisor Eisen's comment about, generating revenue, just curious on one thing. You had said that going forward, you can get a marriage license from Winnebago County and not be a resident. Is that what I'm?
That's correct.
That's
Starting
correct.
That's her office.
That's your office.
I'm the certificate after. She's before, I'm after.
Well, okay, so this is where I'm going. That's actually my question is, so does that mean then, let's say I need to get my real ID and I need my birth certificate, and I wasn't born in Winnebago County. Right now you have to go to the county that you were born in to get that certificate.
Actually, what birth certificates are statewide.
Oh,
Death certificates from a certain date forward are statewide now. And we're just starting with the marriages going statewide.
okay, so then
So-
you could just go to,
So if you were married or born in Wisconsin, but not in Winnebago County, you
Right.
could still come to our office and get your birth certificate.
okay? Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, next we're going to speak with District Attorney Eric Spire.
Is Judge Kester Salas, Salas.
Oh, yes, thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm Eric Spar. I'm relatively new as a DA, actually just over a month now, but I have been in the DA's office for about 17 years. So I do know quite a few of the people in this room pretty well. It's nice to meet some of the new faces up here. But wanted to give a bit of an overview. I'll try to tailor this to what would be useful for people that are sitting in your position. But basically our function is that we take cases from law enforcement that they have investigated, they bring them to us. We have 12 lawyers in our office that are involved in making a charging decision and then following the case through the court system, which involves making appearances, handling motions, ultimately trials in some cases, sentencing hearings. And also, I guess it involves some sort of program creation. We have a number of alternative type programs that are in place that some of which we are involved in administering, some we just really partner with other people. Personnel, this is kind of areas where our office is a little unique when compared to other county departments, because we have 12 lawyers that are state employees. Then we have we have 18 positions, I believe 17 are permanent positions that are county employees. So it's this weird hybrid. And so as far as funding goes, most of our budget is salaries for those county employees. We do have our victim witness personnel. There are 4 of them. They handle essentially when we charge a case, or actually before we charge a case, they're involved in notifying victims of what's happening with the charge, then notifying what's happening in court. There are a number of rights that victims can exercise as far as getting phone or mail notification of hearings. And then after the fact, keeping them apprised of what's going on as well. So they are partially state funded, but the mess from that is that the state doesn't tell us how much they're giving the county in reimbursement until it's too late for budgets. So every year it's different. It's usually, recently it's been, I think, between 40 and 50% of the actual salaries of those 4 positions. So very weird, makes budgeting a little tenuous at best as far as certainty goes. But basically the attorneys are state, those victim witness personnel are kind of state, kind of county, all the rest of our positions are county. We have, I guess the other positions are things like paralegals, we have a number of them. We have a crime data analyst. We have 2 investigators that are retired law enforcement, and actually both from the sheriff's office. And they're involved in subpoena service. They'll do some follow-up investigations, although most investigation, even after the case is referred to us, does go back to the original law enforcement agency. But they have a few different things that they handle. They'll monitor jail calls at times for us as well. Some of the other positions, I guess we have some people that do our diversion programs. So there are a number of people, a risk assessor that helps on the front end of diversions, trying to figure out how we get the right people into those programs and what the rules should be for them. We have people that are involved in monitoring those. The paralegals are primarily involved in the cases that are actively going through court. Once a lawyer makes a charging decision, the paralegals will put together the criminal complaint and any follow-up documents as well. So we don't have real frequent changes in our positions. The one that happened, I think most recently, 2 or 3 years ago, we went from 3 victim witness personnel to 4. That was in response to the Victim Rights Constitutional Amendment that happened early 2020, I believe it was. So that created some additional workload there and an additional position that is essentially a little over half county funded. But for the most part, that's not something that we end up coming to the county board or to JPS for too frequently. As far as resources go, our computers are provided by the state that's for our entire office. We have, I think, maybe 2 computers that were not, because those were extras beyond what the state had provided. But for the most part, our technology is provided by the state. It's maintained by them. We're on a life cycle that historically has been over 5 years to replace our computers. They have significant budget issues with that agency right now because they've increased the number of prosecutors in the state, but have not changed the budget for the DA IT department. So they are telling us they have about a $1 million shortfall. They're going to not be able to continue replacing the computers. And there's actually some debate right now about whether they're going to try to thrust that back on the counties, which would be, I think, disastrous overall, but also a problem because that would involve me coming to you and asking for things and not do that. But we have about a 1-year window to get that figured out. It sounds like they're covered for this upcoming budget cycle. That's discussed right now. There's a Wisconsin District Attorneys Association that they, I think, saw the opportunity to sucker me into when I was new and saying yes to everything in the last 5 weeks or so. So I'm on that now, and at the most recent meeting, that was the main topic of conversation. How can we figure out a solution to this? Whether it's shifting the computers into the DA's budget from the IT department to avoid having that go to the counties. Because really, well, frankly, the concern is that I think there are some counties that simply wouldn't fund it, and that would create just a disastrous situation. So just, I guess I want to give a heads up on that because it could be an issue about a year from now. Our vehicles, we have a couple of vehicles that are county vehicles. Actually, we've had problems with 2 incidents with our vehicles recently. One was part of a hit and run. We were the victims of a hit and run, which they didn't find the person that did it, and then we had to send the case out to another county because we can't prosecute it. So that was just bizarre. But we have one vehicle that has needed to be replaced for some period of time. We got talked into pushing out the vehicle. I'm turning and looking at John here, but that's one that I'm sure we'll be talking about. It's one of the main things those get used for is service of subpoenas. We used to contract that out. We're spending a lot of money on it, bringing that in-house with our investigators 7, 8 years ago, maybe it was. I can't remember exactly when we did that, but it was a significant savings. But it does mean that we need vehicles that are operational, and that's potentially going to be a problem in the near future if we don't address it. Just other things that kind of impact our budget. We went paperless, I think it was about 4 years ago. That was something that had a very positive impact on us from a budget perspective. One of the things that we weren't paperless, we were providing a lot of discovery and paper discovery, police reports and recordings and things like that to defense attorneys. So now we do that and we don't charge them for it. First, it makes things very simple, but also eliminates the need for us to be using all our office machines so much. Programming is another thing that makes our budget a little bit complicated because we have things like urinalysis tests or some costs for courses that people are required to take. That we pay, we contract with different agencies, we pay it, and then we count on getting reimbursed by some of the people that are participating in those. They are not the most reliable at paying for things. I know the sheriff's had experiences like that too with some of the 24/7 programs and getting paid. So we kind of expect somewhat of a deficit in that area. That's one thing that we also struggle to predict with too much accuracy because we don't know who's going to pay. They do have a pretty good incentive to pay because if they don't pay, they can't complete the program. They can't get their cases dismissed or amended. We have gotten very active with grants over the last few years. We have one position in our office that spends a lot of time focusing on writing for grants and then doing what's needed to maintain those, to report data, things like that. They are pretty intense as far as what needs to be done once you have them. We have a half-time position in our office that is grant funded right now. There's also grant funding that goes to some of our programs and educational programs that we're doing for other government and community agencies related to Narcan and addiction. We actually just recently put on a program for Oshkosh probation and parole regarding Narcan use and some related things there. But we always have some of those things going on, especially over the last, say, 5 or 6 years. We've been much more active with that. That was not really something that we had pursued too much in the past. Overall, our office is pretty active with alternative approaches to criminal justice problems. So I'll probably at some point be talking to you about some of those things when we're looking at doing things. Often it doesn't require significant or sometimes doesn't require any funding, but just to keep everybody apprised of what's going on. And many of these things, even if we have a grant, obviously that comes through county board to get approval for that, even if it's no direct cost to the county. I mentioned one of the things we do is trials, and that's something that when people think about lawyers and especially criminal justice, everybody thinks trials. That's what you see for movies or TV. It's really quite a small percentage of the cases that go to trial, and that's all around the state of the country. We have been in the 20s annually for jury trials for the last 10 years or so. It used to be a little bit higher. One of the things when we changed our approach to domestic violence counseling, that really got rid of a number of domestic violence misdemeanor level jury trials. And also our drunk driving trials over time have dropped. As numbers on drunk driving have dropped a little bit overall. Trials have dropped as well. And I won't get into too many of the details of that, just to say that we do about 2 jury trials a month. But as of right now, we have 55 scheduled for June. So it creates a lot of uncertainty with what's going to happen if only 2 of those 55 go. We're still put in a position to get ready for a lot of the other ones. Serve subpoenas, send our investigators out there. We try to negotiate with defense attorneys, find out as soon as possible which ones are going to happen so we don't waste resources. And just a couple updates on things that have happened recently, and I guess going forward, if you'd have me here with some regularity, I'd be happy to provide some of these updates. But we had a few significant cases that resolved in May and June. This was a first-degree intentional homicide case from Oshkosh Police Department. Eris Grady was the defendant's name. There was a 4-day jury trial that happened in March. He went to sentencing in May. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. So just significant events like that involve tremendous use of resources leading up to the trial, and then the trial itself is a number of people spending time in the courthouse, and a lot of law enforcement attention to that as well. There was another defendant who was just sentenced in June regarding a very significant marijuana case. That's kind of interesting because we don't deal extensively with marijuana cases. In fact, we're not really prosecuting possession cases very much at all anymore, but this was a pretty significant amount of dollar value type of case where there was selling going on, a lot of THC edibles being brought in from out of state. This was a Megan case. So Megan is a 4-county drug task force that does cover Winnebago. There was actually a prison sentence imposed in that case, 2 years initial confinement, which kind of extraordinary for marijuana cases. We don't see too many of those that go through, and especially we don't see too many that result in prison sentences. That one was pretty special. Then there was a repeated sexual assault of a child, another Oshkosh Police Department case that just went to sentencing late May or early June. That was based on a no contest plea, was sentenced to 12 years initial confinement, 8 years extended supervision. So some fairly significant cases that have been going on recently. We have a number of significant cases that are in the system still are not resolved yet. And actually, I'm picking up one as I stand here because I spent a lot of time in this building getting ready for a double murder trial that was supposed to happen in January. The week before, the judge and the defendant both got COVID and the trial did not happen. But there have been things that have been getting in the way of trials over the last couple of years, which we didn't really have to deal with in the time before that. But overall, our court system has stayed relatively on track relative to some other counties. We don't have the backlog that many of them do in cases that have been progressing through the system. I think the judges have been pretty aggressive too about getting cases done, and we certainly don't mind that. But otherwise, just a couple programs that are kind of in the works. One, I was talking to Mr. Depperding before the meeting started. We're working on a potential project with a local community group involving essentially getting training to prison inmates to get commercial driver's licenses and potentially putting them to work as bus drivers, not school bus drivers, but other buses where there's a shortage of drivers. So this was a situation that somebody saw to try to address 2 problems and solve it with one complicated solution that does involve anytime we're looking at trying to get something into the prisons that has a lot of obstacles. So it's in the very, very early stages there. Also, right now we're working on a restorative justice program that will be used on juvenile cases. We're working with Michael Rust, who's the Winnebago County Conflict Resolution Center head, working on that. And that's something that would bring together victims and juvenile offenders only in situations where both sides wanted to do it. But it's one of those areas where when I first heard about it years ago, I thought that's a silly idea and I don't think it would work. But the numbers show that it works really well. And so one of the lessons that we see in criminal justice is the intuitive approaches are not always the best ones, or people's intuitive reactions to things are not always correct. And that's one thing our office is big on, is collection of data and use of data to make sure we're making good decisions. So those are some things we have going on, and that's kind of what our office is about. And that's all I got. Thanks.
3 quick questions. First one is those 18 positions that are county funded. And I know we met about a month ago, and thank you so much for taking, that was your first day, right? Thank you so much for taking the,
Oh, I forgot
the
that.
time out to do that. I'm sure it was a very busy day for you, but so those 18 positions that are county funded, are they all paralegals or some other sort of positions that are in the office? How does that break down?
Yeah, so let me see if I can get it right here, because the 18 might include one of the grant positions, so it might just be 17, but we have 5 paralegals, 4 victim witness personnel, 2 investigators, office manager, a diversion coordinator. We have an assistant in the, essentially secretarial assistant in the diversion program. We have a risk assessment person in the diversion program. Crime data analyst. I don't remember if I mentioned receptionist. Maybe I covered them all, maybe I missed one. But so different types, but the big categories are the paralegals and the victim witness personnel.
And the second question I have, and then Supervisor definitely Gabby points about this, the CDL thing, that sounds pretty cool. Is that with the tech, or is that with another local CDL course?
You didn't get that part figured out. It's that early. But actually, there are a couple of similar programs. One is actually operational already. I believe that was in Arizona. There's another one that is just trying to get off the ground in other states. And this community group had identified those and gathered some information. And I had a connection to one of those people. They sent it to me and said, being part of this, that we are able to make it happen. So I think that makes sense. Let's start talking. But again, it has to involve a lot of people that would need to make arrangements for things such as anytime you're looking at trying to get programming into DOC, a lot of people have to get on board. It doesn't move very quickly. But it was something that we figured is worth looking into. We'll see what happens. I don't know.
Sure. Well, I assume public safety as well would have to be almost.
Right. And I know that some of the programs that are out there already have at least given that some thought as far as who would be the appropriate candidates to put into a program like that. So yeah, it's there are lots of things, and it's one of those things that could end up being nothing. I don't know. But it's something that we figure, let's talk about this and see what we can do with it. And if it goes somewhere, that's great.
Are you, I know that before, like years prior, the gossip was, basically texting people to remind them of their court appearance, and that seemed to be pretty good. They like court appearances, upticked by about 30%. Are you following that practice too?
Yeah, that's actually done by the court system, so we're not directly involved in that. And I don't remember how it came about originally and who was involved in making it happen. But I think clerk of courts is actually running that, but it's somebody in the courthouse. So there's an automated system that will, the court commissioner at the initial appearances, he's seeing almost all the defendants right away. He'll ask them, do you want to get text message reminders of your court appearances? And they can say no, that's okay. If they say yes, we would already have a phone number for them at that point, and then they get entered into a system where every time they have a hearing coming up, they'll receive a text reminding them. Missed appearances are very costly. I mean, they delay court cases, they result in people going to jail on warrants, which is another expense for the sheriff that we don't want to have. So anything that we can do to eliminate those missed appearances and therefore the warrants, that we want to do. And that was a pretty simple solution that had a great impact.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I don't even know who to give credit to for it, because I wasn't involved in those discussions when it happened.
Yeah, I was just curious on that. Okay.
All right, thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Great. That's all we had for department heads, unless someone wants to. Oh, fantastic! You got a late ad. This is great.
Oh, you're gonna do it. Oh,
Well, if you want to get up.
no, I thought
think
you were
it's
looking
the
at
next
me.
time.
Next time, I thought you were, no, disregard, go ahead.
I didn't mean to scare you.
No, that's
Sorry.
good, yes.
That's what senses we must. So as all of you know, my name is Mary Ann Miller, and I'm clerk counsel for Winnebago County. And essentially, as Eric handles all of the criminal affairs for the county, my office handles all of the civil affairs for the county. Our goal is to basically provide representation to all Winnebago County departments, 27 of them, committees, commissions, boards, county executive, and we handle basically cases involving children in need of protection or services, which are basically abuse and neglect cases. We handle terminations of parental rights, which some courts have said are equivalent to death penalty cases. We handle guardianships and protective placements. That's often through the Aging and Disability Resource Center. We handle spendthrift trusts. We handle mental health commitments, 980 placements, and I know this board has heard something about that. We handle in-rem tax foreclosures, orders to show cause, zoning violations, civil forfeitures, and basically serve as general legal counsel and try to answer your questions. For the first half of the year, just to sort of give you an idea as to caseload, we have 3 attorneys in our office, including myself. We have 3 paralegals and an administrative assistant. Right now, we are down 1 paralegal. That person is on family medical leave. And we are also down an administrative assistant. However, we just actually hired an administrative assistant to fill a slot, so that's good. To date, for 2022, we have handled 188 mental health commitment cases, in addition to 8 juvenile mental commitment cases. Guardianships have totaled, and mind you, this is just for the first half of this year, and this does not include the cases that we already are handling. Guardianships total about so far 60 this year. Juvenile guardianship cases total about 30. We have handled 11 termination of parental rights cases. And in terms of the juvenile children in need of protection service cases, we've received 21 new filings this year. And again, this does not include the current caseload that we have. So we are pretty busy since we have 3 attorneys who are basically covering this, and so we do the best we can. In terms of our goals, you probably heard we recently moved to the county administration building. So orchestrating that move was pretty intense, given the fact that, again, we have our 3 attorneys and our 3 paralegals. Fortunately, facilities was wonderful in supporting the move and helping us do the actual lifting and the boxes and all of that, but that took a great deal of time to try to get organized. We are still unpacking, but it's difficult to do that because we are obviously trying to handle all the caseload as well. We have also been, as you all know, implementing this agenda item and resolution procedure so that, again, the county board supervisors have a better idea when they're going into committee meetings what legislation is about. So as County Executive Daniel had indicated, this would basically give you guys a brain dump as to what's going on, and then you could ask perhaps more pointed questions. We are also working on a recodification of the county code. It needs to be updated. We have retained an outside contractor, so we are supervising that, but that is a very big project. We are also trying to reduce our paper footprint. When we were tasked with going to the county administration building, it was an opportunity to try to go through some records because, as you probably know, before I became court counsel, we probably had 50 years worth of documents in our coffers. So again, a lot, but that's basically what we can handle. Do you have any questions?
One question and one quick point. When would recodification be finished on the document?
We have been told we should be getting a draft in the next couple of months. Again, it's a long process because we actually started this in January. So I would hope we could get this done by the end of the year, if not early next year.
And the second thing is.
Oh, no.
You were Fordham Law and I went there.
That's right.
Yes.
That's
yeah.
right. That's right. Yeah.
So, quick question on the codification.
Yes.
Once that draft comes to your office,
Mhm.
does that go through this committee and then to the board? How do we solidify that?
So we will look at it and then I can certainly give you an update regarding, what has happened. Basically, what this is all of the changes that have occurred over the last 15, 20, 30 years so that we can have it in one format and accessible to the public. So everything already has been approved by the
It's just
board.
a matter of how we're.
The presentation, that's exactly right.
So numbering will change then, or?
Well, it shouldn't.
It shouldn't.
Shouldn't.
Okay.
It shouldn't. It's interesting because the outside contractor was talking about renumbering and we were resistant to that and saying we would really like to keep the numbers the way they were because it would perhaps unduly complicate things.
I'm thinking about the
The
rules
rules,
conversation
that's
we're having.
exactly right.
What rule are we talking
That's
about?
exactly right. Yeah.
Right,
And right now, actually, even on the agenda where we had talked about 22.11, at one point it was 22.18.
right.
So, yeah. So we are doing everything we can to retain the numbers, the original numbers as passed.
So the end point on that is who decides this is the new system? You do.
Well,
I'm sorry. I'm gonna
no.
lost.
So basically, we have the county code put together in bits and pieces.
Right.
If you actually look at it, it's not really user friendly. So the contractor is basically putting all of our material together that that the board has already passed, and then we will get a version of it, and then obviously vet it, make sure it's appropriate. And then I can certainly show it to the committee,
Right,
which is my
that's-
committee of jurisdiction, but it's already been passed by the board.
Well, that's what I'm getting at is that, does I have to go through any sort of formal approval process? Understanding nothing changes, but how it's organized does change and how we present it might change, correct? Or not really?
Any county has ever had to.
No.
Okay,
Counties do this all the time, I'm sorry, I don't mean to.
Go ahead. You have more, you have been here for a while.
The county board will pass an ordinance and the ordinance book gets updated and renumbered, or it gets slotted in and
Right.
it just gets kind of messy. And so, but it's like you said, it's everything that's already been passed by the board, so it's basically just putting together an index of it, so.
got it. So it's not like, there'll be any sort of changes to the,
No, there's no changes to the language
The
or anything
language
like that,
or-
or the intent.
okay,
No.
okay.
Questions? When was the last time we recoded?
We always did it in-house. I don't think it was ever done for.
I think the first time.
Yeah.
So that's why when you look at it, it's bits and pieces.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, it's a big project.
I will say, I'm looking forward to that because for someone who's coming in and trying to find things, it can be a little challenging. I mean, I'll be honest. So that's a wonderful thing that we're doing there, so.
If they would look at it and say, hey, we should renumber or rename some of these chapters, that would have to go back to the board. If that would be
But that's
for
not what-
clarification, but that's not.
No, that's not.
Okay. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, before we end this item, anyone else want to get up from, I think we're good, right? Okay. Don't want to miss anyone for today at least. Okay, so we're going to close item number 7 on the agenda. And we're going to move to the old agenda number 13, which is Restorative Justice Court's Zoom presentation. So So a couple comments on this. This is just a discussion. And this was born out of a conversation that we had on, again, we have a lot of new board members on this, committee members on this committee. And there are a lot of topics that we don't know much about, and the public in general doesn't know a lot about. Brian had suggested a great place to start is this area of restorative justice. And with Brian's connection with WCA and NACO, that would be a great opportunity for us to learn. Now, this is going to be a very short presentation, so we're clear on that. And it's just that it's an opportunity to learn about this. So as we go forward, all of us can have a better base of understanding when these topics are at least discussed in a variety of ways within this committee. So with that, I'm going to first turn it over to Brian to introduce.
Oh, yes. Who I have here on the Zoom call is name is Jonathan Shar, and he is a University of Wisconsin law professor. He's the restorative justice coordinator for the University of Wisconsin Law School. And I've come upon him when he made a presentation at the Wisconsin Counties Association's annual conference last year. And in regards to restorative justice. Now, when it comes to restorative justice, you may have already heard from District Attorney Spar that he's working on some restorative justice with juveniles. And we do have a local source here in Winnebago County, the Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center, that does already work into some limited fashion restorative justice. Michael Rust, the executive director of the Winnebago Conflict Resolution Center, was also part of the same class that Jonathan Shar is in too. So they actually know each other. This presentation is just simply a form of education. What is restorative justice? What does it do? How does it work? And who's been practicing it? And what are the results? There has been a couple other counties in Wisconsin that have been doing this, some of them for a while. St. Croix County has been doing it for about 20 years now, over on the border. I know in the Marquette area, they've been working on restorative justice, Dane County as well. And Outagamie County just recently started some of the first few steps to start this too. And so with that in mind, I should probably make sure that since this is a PowerPoint presentation, would you be able to get Jonathan Shar host capabilities?
He is co-host.
Okay. All right, good.
So you should be able to share your screen.
Yep. Yeah, it looks like everything should be ready to go, and hopefully I don't run into any technical issues. It looks like your connection is stabilized there, so I think we should be good to go with a lot of that. I guess I don't know how big your screen is as far as sort of seeing me, whether this is going to be helpful to those of you in the room. Necessarily, again, I'm always happy to share. I can send around to Brian even a copy of the slides. Yeah, I mean, there's a number of counties in the state of Wisconsin that are exploring this sort of issue. I've again both presented to and talked with both individuals with different county boards and again from different organizations, and again currently I've had discussions probably right around 3 currently counties sort of looking at this. So yeah, so the idea that it's looking at what does this look like in each part of the state, and then for your sake thinking about like what could this potentially look like for for Winnebago County. So I will start some screen sharing. Once I go to this, I won't be able to see you. Okay, so if anyone has questions or anything like that, just say something, right? I'll hear you, and then I can sort of come back and pause, and then if we do have time, we'll run through some questions if people have them. Okay. Okay, so today I'll talk a bit about, again, sort of restorative justice generally, and then touch a little bit on community restorative courts, which has really been what the counties have been interested in, that I've been talking to, right? So I've talked to Rock, Racine, Milwaukee, and then a couple other counties around the state, in looking at this idea. So there's a lot of different programs, again, and programming even throughout the state of Wisconsin when it comes to restorative justice. I'll sort of get to those later on. There's some examples that I've got on a slide of different programs that operate around the state. But, thinking about this idea of like, sort of what is restorative justice, really it's this, concept of restorative justice is this evidence-based collaborative approach towards addressing criminal behavior that focuses on repairing harm to the victim and to the community, and in the process holding individuals personally accountable for offending behavior, right, for the stuff that they do. Really recognizes that crime is, or conflict even, or harm is relational, that we all live in relationship with one another, and crime is really a violation against both sort of the victim but also against a community, and it impacts all of us, right? The sense of what people do has an effect, for good or ill on other people in our communities, and when we think about this from restorative justice perspective, it really provides a different framework where the person who actually violated, or who was violated or was harmed, the victim, is considered the primary focus of the justice calculus, and thinking about like, what do we do, how to respond to a criminal act, how do we respond to what has happened to a crime in our community, really focus on this idea of accountability. So just, quickly, when we talk about restorative justice, we think about this idea of, where traditionally, the focus is on the person responsible for harm, right? So a criminal defendant in our traditional justice system, and this idea of the response being totally focused on them. So this idea of, who committed the crime, and sort of like, what law was violated, who violated that law, and then what do we do to them, right? Like that's where the focus is. It's all focused on the person who has committed the harm, where in restorative justice, we take a look at the same sort of conduct and we kind of ask a set of different questions to orient ourselves and to frame that in a different way. And instead focusing on this idea of who was harmed, how they were harmed, what can be done to repair that harm, and then who's responsible for repairing that harm. This really recognizes and elevates the role of victims in the criminal justice system. And traditionally the value to which crime victims may serve in our system is sort of furthering successful prosecution of defendants in the way that our system works, right? So they might serve as witnesses, or providing testimony or evidence, as well as providing victim impact statements. But I spent a great deal of my time working with crime victims and survivors around the state of Wisconsin, about their experiences. I'll talk about the data and the research in a little bit, but anecdotally, those experiences of being in a courtroom, and what they sort of get out of that process have not often been all that positive for individuals. It is a difficult, situation to navigate, and for many people, again, for the first time, if they're sort of in there, thinking about like, what does justice mean to them, and then sort of what do they kind of receive, in the way that our current system is designed. And again, it's not a fault of anybody, it's just sort of the way the system works, right? It's the way our sort of system of laws and our criminal legal system operates with its structure, frankly. So when we think about this idea of our traditional system, versus sort of restorative system, again, I sort of mentioned this idea of a focus kind of being on the responsible party, and the victim sometimes kind of gets ignored or lacks information. The responsible party is really just sort of seen in fragments. And instead of, looking at, where do we kind of go from here, we're really focusing all the energy, on looking at sort of that past behavior, and we're really balancing harm with harm, right? And so that person who's responsible for harm is really kind of passive, right? Things are sort of done to them. They're sort of waiting to hear like, all right, well, what is my sentence going to be, right? Like that's sort of it. Doesn't really have to, quite frankly, even do much more than enter a plea, right? And that sometimes could be even a no contest plea, right? Like not even really, they're taking a guilty plea, but not really even admitting to the conduct for what it's worth, and really owning that for people. And in restorative justice, again, we think about things a little bit differently, really placing the victim's needs centrally. also viewing the person responsible holistically, where the total context of who they are is sort of relevant. And also thinking about this idea of rather than denouncing the person, right, the responsible party, we instead are sort of denouncing the act, right? Like what you did is not okay. But this idea of separating the person from the problem and thinking about this idea of like why restorative justice is often so effective at achieving the results that we kind of want to see in creating safer communities, is really about humanizing people, right? And then also figuring out like why things happen and then creating responses that try to prevent them from happening again in the first place and from happening again in the future, other than simply through sort of incapacitation or just intensive monitoring. So instead, we're going to balance the harm that's been done by making things right and giving that person a role in that solution, as well as a responsibility in that resolution. So again, it's really switching where we place that focus in our justice system and really emphasizes personal responsibility and accountability for people's actions. So some of the proven benefits of restorative justice that we've seen, and I'm going to just sort of give some numbers and things from sort of meta-analysis studies, right? So big studies of studies where we get some really, really large sample sizes to look at what does this look like on the grander scale, right? Like what does restorative justice give us in the big picture? And so what the data and research really shows is about an average of a 30% greater reduction in recidivism when you compare similar offenses and offenders who go through the traditional process versus individuals who go through restorative justice process. With some programs and some individual studies finding reductions of up to 50 to 80% or more. A couple related really important points when we sort of dug deeper into the data that sort of says like, all right, well, let's look at the people then, even though we already know that you're less likely to commit a future crime if you go through restorative justice. What they found that there's some even broader impacts even on people who did reoffend. And so what they found is that people who did go on to commit another crime, which was sort of lower or smaller than sort of the control group, they found that the crime that they committed was often less serious offense, right? So good stuff, right? Like less serious crimes. And then also the length of time between reoffense was greater, on average of about 6 months longer, right? So we have this three-pronged approach or a three-pronged benefit that you see in restorative justice is like, number one, overall reduced recidivism. Number two, a greater sort of reduction in offense severity. And then number three is longer before individuals do reoffend if they're even going to. Some examples when we think about how this has been implemented even around the country. Colorado has probably the most comprehensive restorative justice legislation in the country, are diverting a large proportion of their cases, both juvenile and adult. There's sort of Boulder's DA's office, or of a colleague works, talks about they divert more than a third of their juvenile cases annually. They've also seen their pre-file diversion recidivism decreased by 38% concurrent with the implementation of their restorative justice diversion model. And they also saw their statewide juvenile recidivism rate drop to 8%, which is an incredibly low number. Consistently, over sort of a 3-year monitoring period, with the implementation of their restorative justice there. Okay. The next one is meaningful restitution, right? The sense of looking at like what is important to people, right? So getting paid back for the losses that they've experienced. So what we see with restorative justice is we see successful completion rates, but about 25 to 50% greater, right? Sort of more likely to complete the restitution fully, right? 100% dollar for dollar what they owe to a victim is paid, a much higher likelihood of the time. Also, what they've seen is that even where they didn't collect every single dollar, what they found is that it does collect significantly more restitution, right? And so some studies found about 100 to 200% more collected restitution. That's not more that was sort of found to be owed or ordered, but more that was paid, right? And we sort of wonder why. Well, thinking about this idea of understanding how restorative justice works, where responsible parties, think about even your own life. Are you more likely to do something that you are told to do, or more something that you agree to do? And so when we work on sort of crafting restorative justice agreements, that responsible parties have a hand in crafting those agreements rather than sort of simply being imposed upon them. And then when you also think of both young people and also individuals who may be more, again, sort of apt to commit criminal offenses, a sense of look at the criminogenic risk factors, and from antisocial personality disorder to sort of other other factors for peers and different things, of this idea of what they're more likely to do, right? In the sense of sometimes being told to do something is going to be the opposite of what they're going to do, right? If they don't sort of agree with it. So this idea of that it's a collaborative process. I think it comes as little surprise then when we sort of see much higher rates of restitution being successfully collected and more amounts paid to people. The next is sort of this increased sort of satisfaction and feelings of fairness in a process. So it's a meta-analysis study of 7 evaluations found that there was greater procedural and outcome fairness. And this is sort of both sides, right? Sort of people who were victims as well as people who were defendants in those processes. They also found that they were more satisfied with the process. And again, both again, we're talking about sort of victims and offenders, felt that the offender was held more accountable in the restorative system than they were in the traditional criminal justice system. When we look at sort of the long-term psychological effects of what does this do for victims, how does this sort of help them? There's a 7-year study where they followed crime victims. And what they sort of saw at the end of that is that that victims were a third less likely to still be upset about a crime, less than half as likely to fear revictimization, as well as having significantly reduced fear of the person who harmed them, as well as significantly reduced long-term stress, right? So there's some important health benefits to people for being able to take part in these processes. The other things that we'll sort of cover these last 2 bullet points, right, around efficient and faster case resolution, as well as sort of cost savings. There's a couple different sort of studies that have looked at this and looked at cost estimate comparisons, show incredibly significant cost savings per case. You'll hear again this sense of thinking about just again how many people are involved in our criminal justice system and in our criminal justice processes, right? From the judge to the attorneys, to the bailiffs, to the court reporter, to the juries, to again sort of the prosecutors, to victim witness, to like there's a lot of people involved in our system, and it's quite expensive. And so what they found when they were looking at sort of different cost analyses there is that they're seeing approximately about 10%. A restorative justice process costs about 10 to 20% of what it costs to go through our sort of traditional system. There was a county in North Carolina, Henderson County, where researchers found a 2/3 reduction in number of trials due to the operation of restorative justice process. That left a substantial impact at the county level for them. There's also a city in British Columbia that was about roughly even just the third the size of Madison. And their restorative justice program handled an average of about 100 youth and adult referrals per year. And they saw a local savings to their local criminal justice system of approximately $260,000 a year. They also see cases in restorative justice resolve in about 1/3 the time as it takes to get through our traditional process, which is, again, very important for both parties, right? So for victims to not be dragged through this, to sort of know, like, again, like what's happening to them, to not have to keep taking off work and coming back to court and dealing with the uncertainty of that process. And the same thing for defendants of getting things through and wrapped up more efficiently. And again, that quite frankly, this is a result of the way our system is sort of designed and operates, and this is sort of where we kind of end up. What we see with restorative justice at this point, it's one of the most rigorously tested innovations in sentencing and corrections in the world. Okay, there's a Oxford Handbook on Sentencing and Corrections that talked about restorative justice conferencing that being one of the most rigorously tested innovations in sentencing and corrections internationally, both by the number of empirical studies on restorative justice effectiveness, as well as by scientific rigor through the use of random control trial studies. And also pointed out that some of the central questions of corrections and sentencing themselves had not been tested in the same sort of rigorous ways that restorative justice had. And the authors couldn't even find another aspect of sentencing corrections or any other criminal justice intervention that have been subjected to an equal level of scrutiny that restorative justice has. Okay, so sense of like at this point, again, as your district attorney alluded to a little bit earlier, is that that the research is in on this, is that we sort of at this point have kind of mountains of data kind of in our favor of looking at this as sort of the right thing to do. Like it just sort of makes sense for a whole lot of reasons. So there's a lot of different ways that this can look or that this can operate. I'm not going to go through all these different sort of restorative practice models that sort of exist. I will sort of just talk about focus on sort of this last one, right, which is this community restorative court model. Which again, I've helped sort of pioneer here a little bit, again, as well as sort of worked with several of the jurisdictions in sort of looking at this. And it can really be a blend of sort of conferencing models that brings together, again, sort of the crime victim or survivor, the responsible party, community members, trained community members, to work on sort of resolving and crafting a response to the criminal action that has occurred. I think, Brian touched on this a little bit. Here's just some of the examples of the places, again, that sort of exist around the state of Wisconsin. And this isn't, again, not comprehensive, but just sort of, several of them that, again, some serve youth and young adults, some serve youth exclusively, some serve youth and adults, and through a variety of different program models, program types, very different eligible crimes. But yeah, some of them have been around for quite some time and have a really deep and rich history, and a great history of success throughout the state. So this is something that, again, can be used with really all offending populations, quite frankly. My sort of day-to-day is in sensitive and serious crimes, and the use of restorative justice and restorative practices to, again, bring about sort of better resolutions for people, higher victim satisfaction, and looking at, where do we go from here, right? Sort of, what should we be looking at in moving forward and trying to bring some healing to people who've experienced harm. So when we think about the mission and goals of a community restorative court, in order to be effective, it really requires a sort of collaborative approach, right? This cooperation between law enforcement, the district attorney's office, Department of Human Services, committed community partners, crime victims, as well as people responsible for crimes. Really, the goals are providing a voice to victims in this restorative process, promoting community-driven solutions, again, reducing the burden on our criminal justice system, agencies and actors, and then also reducing barriers of criminal records on things like housing and employment. When we think about the sort of long-term effects or collateral consequences of conviction, looking for like, how do we help people become successful citizens, especially, again, sort of focusing on whether that's on young adults, being able to help them be successful sort of later on to obtain and maintain employment, as well as obtain housing, as they sort of, again, even, develop sort of the skills that they sort of need to be successful and again, parts of our communities, and again, contributing members and feeling like they sort of belong and are a part of that, versus feeling isolated, alienated, and sort of removed from that, again, quite frankly, I think contributes a bit to criminality, right? When people don't feel connection to a place and don't feel any sort of responsibility towards them, the likelihood of them harming other people can certainly go up. So some of the examples of the way that the community restorative court operates, at least sort of the one that I have helped with, so we operate as a pre-charge diversion program, looks at both sort of municipal direct referrals from law enforcement, as well as sort of misdemeanor cases, as well as DA felony case referrals, where the respondent has to accept responsibility for their actions as well as the harm done. Again, it is voluntary, right? So victims choose whether they participate, how they participate, whether a case can go there, along with, again, the trained community members in this process. They work on crafting, again, the sort of repair harm agreement and like, what does a person need to do, right? Sort of like, what is required for this person to successfully sort of repair the harm that has been done? What does the community want to see them do, whether that's community service and restitution, or other elements of service or treatment or things that they sort of feel needs to be done in order for them to feel like, feel okay with this person sort of being in their community. Operating as a pre-charge program, then that person doesn't receive a formal charge or a CCAP entry, which again sort of relates to sort of the collateral consequences issues. But obviously, if they're unsuccessful, they just go right back to the traditional criminal justice system, right? So there's sort of nothing lost in that process, and looking at a diversion as a bit of an off ramp from our traditional system, with the ability, again, to be sort of put right back on if someone is not successful in a restorative process. So some of the steps in this process that they have is sort of receiving referrals from officers, law enforcement, or the district attorney's office, where they then look at the individual, they look at the respondent, and determine sort of what their needs are, and sort of what sort of relative risk factors are, and then again sort of reaching out to victims, allowing them to participate if they would like, and then sort of moving forward towards engaging in the restorative process, right? So obviously I'm going to jump past a lot of this because you're sort of not necessarily at this stage of exploration, but just sort of understanding this idea that there are some really solid and deep models out there for like, okay, here's what we do. Thinking about like what goes into these sort of systems, what might be right for you know, for our county, and I think exploring the resources again that sort of exist even within the state of Wisconsin, that could work with your, again, sort of your county board and other sort of local groups. And you mentioned sort of your dispute resolution center, you know, thinking about utilizing resources that are, you know, that are both local and then taking, you know, advantage of other spaces around the state or around the country to look to them to sort of see like what makes sense for, you know, for you, for your county, you know, thinking about this idea of sort of key questions. This is just sort of an example of what might be in a repair harm agreement. Again, the sort of written contract of what the respondent or the responsible party needs to do in order to successfully complete the program. And then sort of shown at the bottom, there's really of what we've seen, the average agreement length of about 3 to 6 months for that. So it can be, this is a non-exhaustive list. Again, it can include many other things sort of besides this, but these are some of the most common ones that that we've seen. You know, I think about this idea of this is something that you're interested in pursuing. I think there's some, you know, some next steps that make a lot of sense, including sort of starting with the data of like, what are your areas of greatest need, and benefit that you might see from identifying the target populations. What we wanted to see with our criminal justice council is they sort of wanted to look at young adults, starting with individuals 17 and to 25, which at the time was tied to the brain science regarding juvenile brain development. Obviously, the science has even evolved beyond that. That shows the brain continues to develop. So we probably would have expanded that had we been creating it now versus when we were looking at it back in 2014. But thinking about who do you want to serve? What are the goals that you have for this program? Oh, I see here, like I noted in there. So this was presentation. I did not move out Racine County from there. Again, but thinking about like what do you need, right? What's responsive to the specific needs of your county, Winnebago County, you know, getting buy-in from the key collaborative partners. Obviously, again, I heard your DA's office, you know, talking tonight of like, hey, here's something that we're already exploring. So that to me is like the best first step that you can have, right? Like a DA who is looking at this or is open to this is the most important partner, I think, in thinking about restorative justice and developing that sort of going forward. And then as well, bringing on sort of law enforcement into there and bringing on all the rest of your key collaborators. Okay. And then education, obviously sort of the funding piece kind of comes a little bit later. And then sort of, again, continuing to build on that, but identifying some of the things that you think about, like, where is this going to be? Again, you even have some local resources that you could potentially utilize for where this could be housed, and how they could collaborate potentially with human services. I think there's a lot of potential that you may have. So I'm going to end the slideshow. Again, have an opportunity for questions here.
So we do have just probably a few minutes, but are there any of the committee, or if anyone else has a question, I would be more than welcome to ask that.
I think you mentioned it might be possible to get a copy of the slideshow you just showed.
Yeah.
I would like that if I could, please. Do you have that, Brian?
No, I don't have it, but I can get it from him. Yeah.
That would be great. I would like that as well.
Yep, no problem.
Yeah, I have a quick question for you. In terms of the associated costs for implementing these programs, specifically in a county similar to our size, would you have any sort of a fiscal impact estimate on how, you know, how much how much money it would take to implement this, and how much staff would be required to hire out of human services, or what additional stuff you would possibly have to bring on to support this and fully staff?
I mean, there's a lot of different ways that you could look at it, and you could look at implementation in phases. I mean, certainly that was not what I was tasked with tonight, was to deliver a cost estimate for your county. I don't know enough about your demographics, or again, I would start with law enforcement. I would start with the data, right? So think about like, all right, if we want the most bang for our buck, think about what are we seeing? Like, what are the most common offenses that we're seeing? If it's looking by population or age group, that's sort of what we did. We sort of started there. We started with the numbers. We sort of said, all right, well, we want to work with young adults. And so then we said, all right, you know, what are the most common crimes that they're committing, right? So we looked at the top 5 of those, and law enforcement and the DA's office was on board and sort of looking at like, here's the things that that people were having. The way that when we started as again, sort of as a pilot project, it was looking at sort of, even just one jurisdiction in, one part of MPD, right? Sort of in South Madison, one district, that then sort of expanded after that sort of pilot year. But, operated with just a single staff member for a significant number of, years, probably, I think it was 3 years before a second person came on here to the Dane County one, and they sort of have expanded across the across the county. And so, yeah, I mean, it really depends on, again, where you're going to house it or how you're going to operate it. Thinking about how it's going to be, funded. I mean, those are things that you kind of have to determine. But quite often, I mean, again, even here, where they're now handling, I mean, they passed their 1,000th case. Like 2 years ago. There's, I think, 5 staff, and like 2 of them are part-time. So I think they only have 3 full-time staff, and then a couple like LTE employees, and have had different program people. So yeah, a lot of places that again, the financial impact is often far under what the sense of like the cost savings that you sort of see in doing something like this, and then again, sort of measuring your sort of outcome results and sort of looking at that. So yeah, I mean, if you wanted to have a conversation of like what would the impact be, I would need to know what these other sort of numbers are and what you're sort of looking at to give you any sort of estimate on that. I again, quite frankly, I couldn't hazard a guess without any of those things. I wouldn't want to.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Maybe a little more on that if you want. We, in our initial discussions with the Conflict Resolution Center, at least for the relatively small pilot version of this, they're willing to take that on at no cost to the county to try it out and see what happens. And we were anticipating pretty small numbers early on, maybe in the 20 to 30 per year range, which maybe is not where we want to end up if this is something that works. But to at least give it a shot, it's something they were open to just providing at no cost.
Thank you.
And I know that the Conflict Resolution Center, I think they're funded by the county by about $30,000. And so, if they were to take on more, obviously they would have to look at expanding their staff. And at that point, we would then have to take a look at, their caseload, what would be recommended for their caseload versus how much additional staff they would need. And then we would be able to kind of calculate out, what our savings would be there. So that those are questions that we could probably, as a committee, look at, going forward over the next year, working with District Attorney Spar and Michael Rust from the Conflict Resolution.
Great. Any other questions from the committee or the general public? All right. Thank you so much for your time and presentation. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me. Could have been a little sharper, a little earlier in the day. We're really dragging on a little into the evening. But I will, Brian, I will adjust the instance of Racine to Winnebago County, and then I'll send that PowerPoint your way. Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you. Good night, everybody.
Night. All right. So that will close old agenda item 13. Then we're going to move to old agenda item 8, which would be now new 9, and that's a discussion. Winnebago County solid waste litigation regarding the dewatering projects. And Mary Ann's going to let us know all about this.
Thank you, Julie Stafford. Earlier this year, I was made aware of a claim had by Solid Waste in Winnebago County against PTS contractors. A lawsuit was recently brought by the Solid Waste Management Board and the county. And I just wanted to give this committee, since it's my committee of jurisdiction, an update regarding this, even though Solid Waste Management had fully vetted it and voted on this, but again, I wanted to let the Judiciary Committee know about this. So basically, as you may all know, Winnebago County and Solid Waste Management owned and operated something called the SNO Road landfill. That landfill ceased accepting waste in 1989 and was closed thereafter. And basically, Winnebago County has been conducting long-term care activities at the landfill since it closed. Okay. And some of those efforts included installing and operating a horizontal groundwater extraction system, which was intended to minimize the migration of groundwater impacted by volatile organic compounds at the landfill. The system was installed back in 1998, so almost 25, close to 25 years ago, and was designed to pump and treat VOC impacted groundwater on the landfill property. Okay. Move forward to 2016. PTS participated in the West Snell Road Sanitary Lift Station project on property owned by the city of Oshkosh. The landfill, Snell landfill, is less than a half a mile from that property. PTS performed work for the city that included dewatering by pumping millions of gallons of groundwater for the purpose of lowering the groundwater levels. Okay? As a result, the dewatering in connection with that project significantly lowered the groundwater level in the surrounding area, including at the Snell landfill. And the groundwater level was drawn below the system such that the pumps could not run, which rendered the system that the county had put in and solid waste had put in ineffective. Dewatering in connection with the project also pulled the VOC impacted groundwater off the landfill property and into areas that previously were not impacted by the VOC impacted groundwater. So as a result, and I should note, we've alleged PTS provided no notice to the county of the dewatering in connection with the project. And we are claiming PTS owed a duty of care to us to avoid causing foreseeable property damage. And again, we're claiming as a result of their actions, the county has sustained property damage, including substantial amounts of money to basically repair what has happened. There were discussions for some time. Solid Waste has its own long-term counsel, and there were discussions, did not come to fruition, so a lawsuit has been filed. This is in very early stages, but again, I just wanted to notify the committee of this situation. I'm not at liberty to go into details because we're obviously in the middle of litigation or just starting litigation, but again, I wanted to give all of you an overview regarding this. And I know Supervisor Eisen, and hopefully I don't know if he's still there or not, but he is semi-familiar with it because he was on the solid waste board as well.
So when you talk about VOC, is that just like battery acid or stuff that just seeps out of just wastewater? Or?
I'll be honest, and again, I don't know if John Raby's on the phone. Yeah, he is. We could perhaps speak to Raby as well.
Yes. Is it appropriate for me to speak at this time, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, please.
Okay. I've had the privilege of serving on the solid waste board throughout this whole episode with the city of Oshkosh. Basically, what happened is Oshkosh had a contractor lowered the groundwater that encumber the solid waste board to the tune of about $350,000. This money, which the solid waste department paid out for technical services and adjustment services, so that the department the county could meet the DNR standards, weighed heavy on the department. And at the present time, there is consultation with a corporate, with a specialist council who has worked with the solid waste department, solid waste board before, and it may result in litigation if there is not an out-of-court settlement. I advise the Corporation Council this is probably not something to place into the public arena at this time. However, in her perspective, she felt that you deserved a heads up on what's going on. But I'm sure that if, well, you wouldn't see the closed session meeting of the solid waste board, but you could visit other publicly available Zoom videos to follow that, consult with supervisor Zestera, who serves on the board since her election, and I thank the Corporation Council for her overview.
Great, thank you. So do you have a feeling on timing for the next time that you would be able to share an update?
No, I would think it would probably be at least another 6 months, because again, we are just getting the discovery out again. The council, DeWitt, is getting the discovery out, so we are waiting for certain answers. So obviously, if there's anything substantive, I will alert Judiciary, but solid waste is obviously following it. But again, I felt it important to be transparent with finding it as well.
Are you at liberty to say we're private citizens? Do they have property damage at all?
I don't want to get into that.
Any other questions?
Yes, I'd like to make a contribution that I believe is the case. To the best of my recollection, time is of the essence for the solid waste board to settle this issue because of the statute of limitations, which would close out any form of recovery for this law. And to the best of my recollection, that is why there's an urgency in the solid waste board to resolve this issue. Time is of the essence.
Okay. Great, thank you, Paul. All right, thank you very much. Okay, more to come on that. We're going to close number 8 on the agenda and move to number 9, which is Sheriff's report.
Okay, I'll be brief. May was our highest number of overdoses that we've seen in the ER. There were 59, additional 35 with EMS. 15 of them were 20 years old or younger. 10 to 23 of them had suicide ideation or were an actual attempt. And again, it's the highest in the last 9 months. So those are pretty alarming numbers. We held a walk-in hiring event on May 24th. We did 3 interviews. 2 pass the backgrounds, both have prior experience in the last. So our accelerated benefits policy that was put together, the lateral transfer accelerated policy, benefits policy that the board approved. 3 of the last 4 correctional deputies, 1 patrolman is experience, so we are drawing people with prior experience to our agency. Currently have 4 openings for jail deputy, 2 in background, so that's going to leave us 2. 1 patrolman, 3 dispatchers, 1 in background, so that'll leave us 2. And then booking security clerks, we have 2 openings, 1 in background. So we're doing much better than we were just 6 to 9 months ago. Counts in the jail today, we're at 235. 17 are ES sanctions. Those were being paid for by the state. We have 39 on GPS. That's extremely high as well. We have 5 Hubers. We're trying to get as many people out of the jail as possible because of COVID and bringing them back into the facility. And it was a huge problem when COVID was at its height. And we actually have another issue right now, but it's under control. Trying to keep those people from coming back into the jail. The 5 that are currently on traditional Huber, where they come back into our facility, are homeless. So that's a problem. We're trying to find them housing, but there's issues with that. Any questions?
In regards to those that with suicidal ideation, how many of those have been referred to our county crisis center?
I can't answer that question specifically because it would go by agency. I'm sure. I feel confident that any of them that were actual suicide attempts would, the ideations, they would talk to crisis, but wouldn't necessarily be on any kind of hold or anything. So really, the hospital, if you show up to ER with an overdose, law enforcement might not even be involved. So I can't answer that question specifically.
Okay. And one other thing too, in regards to those overdoses, and I'm not even sure if you're at capacity to answer, but you know, how many, I know that the county has a couple of places where they can take an AODA assessment and then they can make recommendations for treatment. Are those that have overdoses, are they aware of this?
Yeah, I don't know specifically. That would be through crisis and social services. We do make all of that information available to those that we come in contact with, but as far as those that are taken care of by EMS or through the hospital.
Okay. Okay, just curious.
Just a couple questions.
Yeah,
First
sure.
is from a staffing point of view.
Mhm.
You said that you're feeling better. What is the historical average of vacancies? Are we at more of that historical average, or are we still kind of struggling?
We are much better than we have been in the last 3 years. I would say we average about 12 vacancies throughout the department. Right now, if you take out the backgrounds, we're at 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we're at half of where we've been traditionally in the last 3 years. So we are doing much better. A lot of it has to do with that accelerated benefits, because I can leave an agency and I can come here without losing all of my vacation. I'm not starting at the bottom when it comes to pay. We're recognizing at least, we recognize half of their seniority or the experience that they bring.
And then for July 4th, reading of the
Yeah.
declaration, what time? will
8
that be
a.m.
roughly?
And the parade, I think, starts shortly at 9:15-ish, somewhere in there, so.
Okay.
So completed by.
Quick question, when do you present your budget to this committee for the next year?
Well, I have to meet with the county exec on
August 8th.
August 8th. So we'll present August or September, one of those two, depending upon what input I get from the county exec.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, just wanted to put it on my docket.
Good question. Are you at liberty to say, is the overdoses the types of drugs, fentanyl, heroin? what was the
Fentanyl,
base?
heroin, typically, our meth has increased. We've actually seen fentanyl in marijuana. So yeah, it's very prevalent.
Just as a follow-up, because I'm just not very smart on that. Are these fentanyl laced drugs, or is it, can you just get fentanyl?
No, it's typically polydrug, so it's multiple. It's heroin laced with fentanyl to give you a longer and more intense high.
I had no idea. I had no idea either.
Yeah.
I didn't know
But
if there was.
most of the overdose deaths that we've seen are polydrug. It is other drugs laced with fentanyl.
So it's an enhancer. Is that why you
Yeah.
see it in there?
Yeah.
Oh. Supervisor Isaac, do you have any questions? Oh, okay. Oh,
Not at this time. Thank
okay.
you.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to close item 9. And we are going to go to 10. Okay. Consideration / vote resolution 59052022, amend section 22 committee meetings of the rules of Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.18. So I'm going to recommend we do this in a systematic way, because this one has a lot of tentacles. It's okay, that's good, that's great. I love that. There's the resolution that's coming forward from IS. I'm going to ask Supervisor Dowling to take us through that. Then we have some considerations that Aaron Miller brought up that I want to have discussion on. And we also heard some questions from Sue. I want to make sure we do that. But I want to do this in an orderly way, so we're not all over the place and all of a sudden it's like 11 o'clock and we haven't gotten here. So I'm hoping that we can keep in that kind of structure, working through this. And then at the end, we can kind of decide what our next steps are. We may need to circle back and do some additional work depending on how our conversation evolves. So with that, are you okay, Rachel, to come up and talk through this?
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Please come up. And everyone should have a copy for committee members, right? We have additional.
This is just some information that we discussed. These are the 4 most common questions during our IS meeting. That's helpful to refer to. For fun, absolutely.
Yes.
Again, Rachel Dowling, County Board Supervisor, District 1. I am bringing forth Resolution 59-052022. We did make some adjustments during the IS meeting.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to address that item 10.
I think that's what we're on right now.
Oh, yes, let's just clear what we're talking about that Supervisor Dowling is going to bring us through, and then we'll address your concern.
So the resolution after IS discussed reads as all meetings and buildings and online educational events shall be held in a hybrid mode, live streamed or digitally broadcasted and recorded. The live stream platform must include an option for the public to make video appearances during the appropriate time for public comment. The recordings will be made available until the end of the current term. So the 4 main questions we had and addressed during our IS committee meeting was cost. We are just defining the rule. There is no cost to defining a rule. Number 2, how do we live stream our meetings? In this room that we're currently in, we have built-in camera systems. Winnebago County also uses a camera system called OWL, OWL for short. Those owls, we have 6 of them available for use.
Well, then I'm gonna need to get some direction.
We have 6 of those available for use in various areas.
Slow down and stay in the right lane.
It happens again, I'll ask.
That's okay. I'm flexible. And then access. We wanted to make sure that the system is easy to use for everyone. So Director Francoeur, as well as the IT department, went through and created a cheat sheet. So if people have questions or need to use the OWL system on their own, they're able to do so without tech support being present. And then the last big question everyone had was when? When does the public talk? The public talks in accordance with Robert's Rule of Order, which would be during the meeting agenda time, during that appropriate time. Other than that, the public is not allowed to make comments during the meeting or talk. So those were our 4 main questions. I don't know if anyone else has any direct questions as of this point for me.
So I do think that I just want to make this clear, for me at least, and I'll just articulate it. And that is that stepping back, we have this new rule that was instituted in April. And I know that oftentimes we get into this conversation, we start debating that rule. And that's not the purpose of this resolution nor this conversation, is debating that rule. It's useful if we separate that from this conversation.
That sounds very fair.
Right?
Yeah.
Because I personally struggle a little bit when we talk through this, because it feels like we start debating ancillary topics and not the topic at hand. And all I will say is that if someone feels strongly that that rule is not the right rule, then someone should come forward with a resolution challenging that rule.
Correct.
But this is about specifically, please correct me if I'm wrong, this is about clarifying what this meant, number 1. And number 2, this is really adding the reporting piece a little bit when it comes to other types of transmitted kinds of meetings that are public in nature, like educational sessions.
Correct, absolutely. So one Supervisor Gustafson and I, 2 of our big main concerns was that the meetings weren't defined as to being in buildings. So for example, I'm also on the Park and Rec Board. We have a meeting coming up. We are literally walking through a swamp. We do not have internet access. So that's part of the reason why we have defined meetings in buildings as meetings that need to be recorded, as well as online educational meetings. Again, for example, I am also on the Diversity Affairs Commission. During our meeting in May, we talked about mental health awareness. The meeting took place between 3 and 4 p.m. It left out anyone with a regular job. Any parent who is picking up a child from school during that time could not attend the meeting. Only 56 people attended that meeting. There is no replay. To me, that's disgusting, if I'm going to be honest, because it took taxpayer dollars to get this meeting up and off the ground. And then the last thing we addressed was the option for the public to comment. From a tech side of things, we can live stream off multiple platforms such as YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, Twitch. However, the public cannot comment with video and audio using those streaming platforms. So it's really important that we define that. And I think I had heard Sue ask a question and a concern about other educational events. These are only online educational events as hosted by the county, as available to the public for regular open meeting laws. It wouldn't have to be like private, like if the IT. No, not closed session. If the clerk's office is holding their own private meeting, even if it's on Zoom, that doesn't count because the public is not invited.
And I definitely don't want to put words in your mouth, so please But I think part of the concern as well, and it's a valid concern, in my opinion, that they don't want this, or anyone doesn't want this to be an onerous thing. And there was a fair amount, initially, a fair amount of vagueness to it. And so I think that's a part of what you're trying to do here as well, correct? Is to try to bring some detail so people understand what this is and what this isn't.
Correct.
Right, that's part of, from my understanding.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And a lot of the changes that we've made during the IS committee meeting address those issues. So basically, if we're in a room with internet access and the ability to plug something in for a camera, we should be able to give that to the public.
So and to me, as I think about and step back and I think about some of the major concerns that people expressed, one is the functionality, which I think is, you addressed here. Another is the cost piece of it. And we've heard a lot of different numbers thrown out there.
Yes.
And I was fortunate enough to be able to listen to the IS committee meeting when this was discussed. And so there is, I think, a better grasp of the cost structure that's required for such an endeavor. And I think that might be beneficial as we continue this conversation to make sure people understand what those costs are.
Sure.
So I think that will help people.
Sure.
And then the other thing too is, and I think it was the chair, not chair, the department head. Yes, thank you. I think she even said that, listen, there's a short-term thing that we can do to get to the spirit of this new rule, and then there's a longer-term view.
Correct.
Right? There was this two kind of view or two different kind of planning. That also, as I thought, was an interesting approach, and one that I think that we'd want to have some discussion on, conversation, especially for those supervisors who are unsure kind of what the implementation piece would look like and how complex that really is.
Correct. Yeah. And from my understanding, to purchase the 6 OWL systems that the county currently has available, not all of them are being used. A lot are just sitting in a box. So that's an issue. So it's not that we don't have access to these to use them. It's just that they're honestly not being used. So the IT department, again, went through and created a cheat sheet, how to use them, how to plug them in case they're not available, to help during meetings, which I think is fantastic. I also spoke with Patty, and if for some reason the cheat sheet does not work, I have volunteered to create a video tutorial for people so that they can watch it. Maybe that might help with technology gaps that we have within our county board. Other than that, to purchase a entirely new OWL system, if we want more, it's around $800
Per system.
per system. But that would assume that we have 6 consecutive meetings running.
And I will say this much about the OWL system. So it was used at the last PNF, and it's quite impressive.
Yeah.
How it can pick up. I mean, it was just sitting on the corner of a desk, and it would zoom in onto the person who's speaking, even if that person wasn't actually on the desk system. And the quality was really, really good. So I was actually kind of surprised. It was a little bit like, okay, I'm aging myself, the Brady Bunch. I think we're kind of all of this generation. Well, most of us are. We've talked about that. So I will say that it's interesting.
Oh yeah, it's a fantastic system. Again, I'm just not sure if people are using it. I know that when the rule was initially passed back in April, there was a knee-jerk reaction of, what do we do? Let's just all meet online. And for people that don't have unlimited internet access or computers at home or smartphones, that excludes them from the meetings entirely. And that's not fair. So addressing that issue as well, that we can absolutely meet in person. And there's ways to do this
I do have a
Can I
question.
speak to the owls? Sorry, I don't have a raised hand. I'm sorry. Other than this. Can I speak to the owl quantities that we have?
Yes.
Okay, I'm Jennifer Ritten. I'm from Information Systems. Patty's on vacation, so I'm here for her. Although we do possess 6 owls, those are not necessarily like one is in the mobile command center at Sheriff. Like that's not available for use on a daily basis. One was purchased by the DA. Again, not something that can just be checked out by anyone. 2 were purchased by the health department. You know, those again are I'm sure they'd loan them out if they weren't using them, but we have 1 that we have available for checkout that we purchased from our budget that we're willing to lend out at the moment. Just because there was nothing else available. So I wouldn't say we have 6. I don't think that's stating it correctly in my opinion, because again, like the DAs is the DAs. So maybe they're willing to share, yes, and that would help for their meeting, but it's not for all, however many committee meetings. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you. That wasn't, I don't remember that being explained, that they were kind of guarded before, but I appreciate that.
Not guarded, but I mean, they were bought by a certain department, so they're not just, you know, available at any given time for any department to use, is my clarification.
Okay.
And that would include conference rooms like this, as an example, which already has that mechanism within the conference room. So this wouldn't need an owl.
Correct.
Correct.
Yeah.
I'll yield to corporate counsel. We're going to get a word in.
I just had a clarification with the wording from the IS committee. Yeah. So when, again, you're trying to say all meetings in buildings and online educational events shall be held in a hybrid mode.
Yes.
Colon. Live streamed or digitally broadcasted, but hybrid means in person and live streamed or digitally broadcasted. Because again, just if you look at the wording in the IX section, when it says shall be held in a hybrid mode, live streamed or digitally broadcasted and recorded, might it be more clear if you say in person and live streamed or digitally broadcasted? Because when I look at hybrid mode, I mean, you can think in person, but it doesn't specifically say that. It says live stream or digitally broadcasted. Or is it obvious that you don't need to say in person? That's my question.
That's a great question. I'm not a lawyer, so I can ask my corporate counsel.
I think to avoid any confusion, you would probably want to put in person.
Okay.
And live streamed or digitally broadcast.
Instead of a hybrid
So
mode.
they shall be held in a hybrid mode. In person
Got it.
and live stream or digitally. So it's in person, there's one hybrid.
Yeah.
Okay, and the other is live stream or digitally broadcast, right?
Perfect.
Because the way I look at this, you could argue, oh, hybrid does it mean live stream or digitally broadcasted?
Yeah. No, absolutely. Thank you.
That's what
I appreciate that. Yes. I'm fine with changing whatever we need to change to.
That was just a thought.
I like the thought. Yes.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to call for an amendment to agenda item 5905. And that is corporate counsel's saying after, so in a hybrid mode, colon, in person, comma, and, or no comma, and live stream or digital broadcast. So I'll offer that as an amendment.
Is that clear? Yeah, okay.
I will second.
Okay, he's not there, is he? Okay. Any discussion on this motion?
Question, just because I recognize that I'm naive. On line 11, brief comment. I share your sentiment in that I've been very disappointed in to certain meetings or recordings. But on line 11, recordings will be made available until the end of the current term. Can that be extended? In my research now for the board, I'm going back looking to see what the boards have done, and I would love to look at what happened 3 years ago, 4 years ago.
So let's table that just for a second. I'd like to actually vote on this change. No, you're okay.
No,
And
absolutely.
then let's circle back to that.
Because I hear what you're saying, and I would have to agree with you. I have not changed that portion that you're addressing.
And there's going to be another conversation that kind of revolves around that as well. So hold that thought if you're okay.
Yeah, I was out of order. Yep.
Perfect. Thank you. All righty. So all in favor of, let me just restate it then. So all in favor of changing essentially line 9, where we were going to add in person and live stream, please say A. Aye. Opposed? That carries. Okay. We got that. Perfect. Now with that, you can please.
Oh, wait, whatever, I just have one question.
Okay. Did you want to finish that thought?
Is there a reason it's only current term, or we could make a friendly amendment to more or an indefinite time?
So
Is it a storage issue?
So
Is that what I'm
with
hearing?
this, another consideration is this, and this is, what is our requirements for records retention? And do you have more?
No, although I will say, as we've discussed, Supervisor Hanson, you're very insightful because that line is a problem. Because under our records retention policy, there is nothing addressing how long you need to keep video or audio of a recording. So that would suggest that the default would be a 7-year period. And obviously, and that's under state law, and therefore that contradicts what is in this rule, which talks about until the end of the current term, which is essentially 2 years. So the remedy would be either to change the wording of the rule or to have a record retention policy referencing retaining these records. Now, the other piece, and I know you've talked about there's no cost, perhaps not with the owls, but the storage piece, and I think even Supervisor Depperding touched on this. A record, based on my research to date, is not just the audio piece, it is the video piece. So in order to comply with open records, and again, I'm still researching, but based on everything I see, you're going to need to retain not only the video, but the audio. And if it's not addressed in the policy or in the record retention policy, which it is not, because again, this was adopted initially in December of 1995, perhaps before Supervisor Flom was born. And revised in 2017. This is very, very complicated, and we need to go piece by piece, as Chairman Stafford is talking about. So again, the costs are not only just the owl pieces, and obviously IS can comment on this, but the storage piece. And if we have to store video and audio and to Supervisor Hanson's piece, the fact that it says current term, but that conflicts with state statute, there's a problem.
Well, we do, I'm gonna have to put words in your mouth, but we do believe that state statute wouldn't necessarily dictate 7 years for video and audio, correct?
That has not been addressed. It's
Well,
based,
and
go ahead, you,
The County Clerks Association works with the Wisconsin Historical Society on record retention. That's part of our job.
Okay.
And that is something that they are in the process of updating because this is all new technology. And so at this point, we are being directed that it has to be kept for 7 years. We met, excuse me, with the Historical Society at our March meeting, and they're putting together work groups trying to figure out how to handle this because they realize the significant impact financially it's going to have on counties and municipalities to retain these. So I don't want to interrupt you, but it is being looked at and it is an issue.
so has anyone decided?
No, nothing
No.
yet, but we talked to Josh Ranger from the Historical Society, who's at UW Oshkosh. He is the archivist for the state of Wisconsin, and he's the one that can give us a lot of insight into that as well. So-
And in fairness, with, again, in our record retention policy, and Clerk Erper and I have talked about this, for committee minutes, you have to keep them for 7 years. For, county board proceedings, it's forever permanent. But, so this is in a state of flux.
And we've been keeping the county board proceedings ever since we started videoing them through Oshkosh Media. They're on CDs, so we aren't taking up any space on the county system. So if there's a way to transfer these to some sort of a hard, with, something like that, I don't know, but that's.
Well, I guess that will be, I'm sorry. Just go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify quick, the changes I'm making don't add cost because the rule was already passed back in April by Supervisor Mike Norton. That's when the cost was incurred. The changes I'm making incur no cost because the rule is already in place. I just wanted to make sure
Right. No,
that was
that's
clarified.
what
You're
I-
already bound to this.
Right.
So the rule already exists, correct. The definition I'm adding does not add extra cost.
Right, and I think part of what we're finding through these conversations is we're trying to add to it
Mhm.
to solve these other things. And
And like I work in digital media. That's my job. So the rule is 3-2-1. You have 3 copies of everything you own. 2 are physical copies. So whether that's on a hard drive, multiple hard drives, wherever those go, flash drives, whatever. And then 1 is in a cloud. That's my rule for my personal business. So I would suggest the same for the county. If we're not already doing that, Sue suggested that we do have CDs, which I think is great. My computers don't have CD drives anymore, so maybe those could be
Yeah,
switched
but-
onto like a hard drive or something, external hard drive stored in a safety deposit box. I don't know.
it is challenging when the mediums change. 'Cause
Absolutely.
I have a lot of 8 tracks. So I get that.
Well, and now my new computer I bought doesn't even have a flash port. So
Right.
I do have another question. too,
Sure.
Is, this states that all meetings and educational events, so that would mean including like, county board tours, right?
Online educational events. So no, because the county board tour is not online.
Okay, all right.
We're held in buildings.
Correct.
So, what about ones that are like, forums that are in person? A perfect example is, for instance, the 4th of July, reading of the Declaration of Independence.
Is that posted on the county website as an open meeting?
It is.
But I don't think, if I may for a second, I don't think that's hosted in a building. We're
On the
outside.
steps.
Right, we're outside. I guess like, actually, the only thing would be the party. But then again, the Christmas party that we have, holiday party we have at the.
Well, there could be like another thing I wanted to bring up, and we have to just be as thorough as possible. But Supervisor Warnke's funeral, that was that was a quorum that we had to post onto the county website. So that would be in a building, it would be in a church. So, so these would qualify for something like this. So, you know, these are just things that we.
Is
just
that
have
a
to think
meeting?
about.
No.
It was posted as one.
Like there was an agenda?
Not necessarily agenda, but it was posted as a meeting or a quorum. Is that correct?
No, but there's a difference. So please correct me here. I thought there was a difference between a quorum and a meeting. They're not the same, right? A meeting is not the same as a quorum. A quorum is just when you have,
Correct.
right? So we could post something and say we have a quorum, but it's actually not a meeting. But a meeting, you will have a quorum.
Otherwise, you wouldn't have a meeting.
Correct. But that, my point is, you could say a funeral, you're gonna have a quorum there, but it's not a meeting. So that wouldn't apply to this rule. Right. Correct.
Well, if, that certainly resolves that problem, if that is true, you know, if you are correct.
I'm just making
Right.
assumption based on what I'm looking at.
The other comment, Mary Ann and I were just talking, the online educational events, if you were gonna have a committee having an online educational event, you would be posting that as a meeting.
Correct.
So that's kind of redundant and kind of confusing.
Kind
Because you would only be, this should only be pertaining to committee meetings, I'm assuming this rule. And so an online like I said, if it's gonna be for a committee, it would already been posted as a meeting. So
Correct.
that could-
So one of the reason I added online educational events is because the Diversity Affairs Commission has their own bylaws.
But we post them as a commission. That's why my thought was if you would just put in whereas 22.18, all county board, committee, commission and board meetings in buildings shall be held in a hybrid.
Correct.
So that's, but I mean, so that would be a posted commission meeting.
Sure.
Can you say the language again?
Yeah, that's,
Okay, I just said, whereas 22.18, all county board, commission, county board, committee, commission, and board meetings in buildings shall be held in a hybrid mode.
That sounds amazing. I love that. I can't vote on it, but I like it.
Should it be 2211 just for
Oh,
clarification?
yes.
yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so 20, yes.
We're gonna get these numbers right. It might be 2024. But we'll get there. Okay, so what's that?
What was that language again?
Okay, so whereas 22.18, I'm sorry, 1.1.
Mhm.
So we're changing the 8 to 1. That we don't have to vote on, that's just what it is. All meetings, no, say it one more time.
All county board, committee, commission, and board meetings in buildings shall be held in a hybrid, in person and whatever Jacob had added there.
County board meetings.
All county board, committee, commission, and board meetings. So you're laying out all of your options. Is it a committee, is it a commission, is it a board? In buildings.
I just want to clarify, if I could, please, does that include, like, for example, I was not able to attend the diversity question, and I can't find a recording of the speakers that wrote. Is your language including?
Yes, that would be why you
that
can't find a recording.
But that's a commission, so then that would
be included.
be included in there.
Again, that's just, it doesn't make sense that the county is using resources to host meetings. Especially if we're all online, we're on Zoom doing it, so it just doesn't make sense, especially as Sheriff just talked about, incidents in our county also revolve around mental health. Doesn't make sense that we wouldn't give that out to the public to use. It seems like a disservice.
We have a motion for something.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I move to amend resolution 5905/2022, amend section 22.0 committee meetings of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22. Whereas 11. Whereas 22.11 all county board committees, commissions, and board meetings in buildings and strike and online.
Okay, any conversation on that specific change? Any discussion? Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay, that passes. That is a fantastic ad. Like seriously, fantastic.
Yeah.
Yes.
Don't you think?
I love
really-
it. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Any Diet Coke?
I will buy you a 24 pack.
There you Okay, so, all right, so that feels that,
Line 14, just so we, and I know it's just a housekeeping detail. We're gonna need a motion to amend line 14 to reflect that it's 2211, not 2218.
do we need to do a motion for that? Yeah, okay.
Mr. Chairman, I move to amend resolution 5905/2022, amend section 2240, committee meetings of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.11 on line 14 towards the end. Rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.11. Second.
All right, any conversation, discussion? No? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay. So we have that piece. Now there's this piece that was brought up about the timing, and we need to address that. So I have a question, clarification. To notwithstanding the direction that we get from the state, so we're just going to say they're working on it. I would assume that they're going to be reasonable in that assumption and not have to carry these digital assets, in perpetuity. We'll just assume that. What is the process to make changes to the retention policy? Is that a resolution that is voted through this committee to the board? Or is that an administrative thing? How does that work?
Your past, I can give you my thought, but I know Clerk Ripper's been here for a long time, so.
I don't know what makes me think there's some reference in our ordinance that says that we shall follow the state statute on things that we aren't specifically listing in there. I'd have to go back and look,
Right.
but we always have to default to what the state
Unless we
tells us.
specifically, so we
Unless-
could have
correct.
something in a retention policy that specifically calls out recorded meetings. Right, we could, and those will be kept for X amount of time. My question is, if we do that, what is the process?
That would be if you're going to get into the record retention piece. This is part of our county code, which is ordinance, so then it would have to go to committee and board.
Correct in saying an ordinance that the county has can. I mean, if they set something for 7 years, we can't turn around and have an ordinance say, no, we just want to do it for 5.
Correct.
Okay, we have to be.
Yes, please.
Since it's per state statute, could we remove the specific year named and just write per state statute?
Well, that was where I was gonna go after this, and that is we could just remove the policy to be available to the end of the term. That could be struck. That could be something.
Right, because the board referred this resolution to this committee
Right.
to review it, and that's
So,
what you're doing.
We could remove the recordings will be made available until the end of the current term. So we could strike that. That would take care of the problem short term. There still is a long-term question, but that's beyond the scope of what this intended resolution was for. I think that has to be a separate conversation, because at some point you have to, I'll be honest, if we start doing this again at the county board, I am gonna call for division of the question, because I just feel like we pile on way too much sometimes, so I think that I think we'll be better served if we're a tad more specific and narrow on that, trying to address this, so. With that, I can't actually do a motion.
So, and I have a question for corporate counsel for clarification. If we strike that last sentence on line 11, would the default assumption from a legal perspective be that this is just as per state statute?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
What? You're getting a lot of practice. Who would like to? Fantastic.
I will make a motion to amend resolution 59-052022, amend section 22.0 committee meetings of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.11. And strike line item, strike part of 10 and 11. Strike recordings will be made available until the end of the current term.
Second. Do we have a second? Any discussion? Questions? Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ayes have it. Okay.
I have one question for I have another question.
Yes. Oh, yeah, we're not done yet.
So for basically, if we have to address the storage question at a later date. Would that just go through amending the record retention policy to allot more space for digital storage? Or could IS just make a request in its budget for more space for storage to have the visual and audio components kept for that mandated period?
There are two ways to address it. It could be via an ordinance and changing the record retention policy, or it could be coming to this committee because you handle rules and saying, we want to clarify Rule 2211 now that the state has come out and given us a policy. So you can do
anything until then.
right.
But how do we address the cost factor if we are required to keep retaining all of these things? You know, we'll have to come at some point, somebody will have to come and say, we need X number of dollars. I see.
We already have a bill that you need to pay from the storage perspective. So, I mean, we have costs already that we've incurred that is technically in the county board's hands that they have to pay. When a department comes to us with a request for something that they want, that, you know, that's theirs, they have to pay for it. So we have a very quickly cobbled together a PC and some drives that I have an invoice for that we would typically journal entry to the department. We get the approval and an account number from the department head. That would be the standard process there for us.
Do you have a cost yet, Jennifer, with that?
I do. I sent it to you and Tommy again, and I think John Damon was on there as well, probably a few weeks ago already.
Okay, I'll go back and look, sorry.
And that's just, again, the very smallest costs that we cobbled together to try to adhere to this rule.
So just a quick question. I know that Patty was talking about that we will be transitioning to more of a structured Office 365 structure. We're probably moving away from Zoom and we'll be using Skype or Teams, whatever.
Hopefully.
Since I'm fairly aware of the package that 365 is, it's pretty much standard that OneDrive gives you a fair amount of storage capacity. So is this something that as we start talking with Microsoft, we can negotiate a fair amount of storage space via OneDrive and store them in there?
Microsoft does not negotiate in our experience. They have certain license levels, and the license level that you pay for affords you a certain amount of space. That is on a per user basis generally. And that is only one form of storage. As she was referring to previously, you need more than one form of storage. So you need it in multiple locations, things like that. So that would be one location. Now you still need other locations.
But isn't OneDrive a redundant system? It's not just one place, multiple places. Pretty sure.
True, yes, but that's all eggs in one basket kind of thing. And we would have to look at the licensing on how that would work for, it's not like, in looking at the licensing, it's per user for OneDrive. The other component is SharePoint, which has more of a file server storage area.
Right, well, I could have sworn they had an enterprise solution where maybe it is
It's SharePoint. Mhm.
It kind of converged SharePoint, OneDrive. It gets a little convoluted, but
Yes, it does.
but I would think that it might be, and I mean, listen, I'm not trying to give you any sort of direction or anything, but I'm just saying it might be an area for us to investigate if, as we look at cost, if it's cheaper to somehow leverage at least some of this technology that we are going towards anyway. It might be worth it, I don't know.
It won't be cheaper. No, it won't be cheaper. It will actually, that will be a large chunk of money that we have to ask for to even convert from our current licensing structure to an online licensing structure. It will be a considerable difference in cost. So I don't know that you could label it as cheaper, but it is included in the license cost if you look at it that way, yes. But that is up to 2 years down the road. Our license agreement doesn't end until 24, and we hope to have a new license agreement in place at that time. Pending cost approval.
Yes.
Jennifer, are we able to use like a Dropbox system?
Possibly. I mean, there too, that's not free. There's costs in place for that too. I mean, it's public record. So certainly there's less concern from a lot of the other aspects we have to consider when we look at a solution like OneDrive. It's possible.
Okay.
I mean, our first location is YouTube. We have that in place already.
Yes.
And the PC that we put in place is an on-site storage, so that's already the second. So we're doing 2 already.
Okay, perfect. I will plan to reach out to Supervisor Gustafson so we can talk about that at our next IS meeting. Is that okay?
Talk about the cost or the other, or like OneDrive, you mean?
Adding budget for the IT department for storage so that we can get the ball rolling on that, so we're not playing catch up.
Yeah.
So you can actually disband.
Is that okay? So we can.
Yeah, so we need to move back. So going back to my earlier comment, and I'm looking for the committee here for their thoughts. So my individual thought is we vote on this as it stands, and then we have the recommendation to have I think you would just mention to me, is this a separate resolution or recommendation on?
Yeah, and I guess
Cost structure.
my question would be for corporate counsel is like, this alone just deals with the rule itself, and then the items for budgeting out satisfying the rule would come in a separate piece of legislation, because this is, I mean, this as it is has been we don't want to get too in the sticks with having the budget item that's included in the county board rules.
And I was actually just speaking to Clerk Erber. So when the package is sent out tomorrow, in addition to all of the other resolutions, there will be this resolution brought back with the changes that were made today. And therefore, the budgeting piece is not even addressed because you took out the piece of the recordings.
The assumption that we're going to, this is, we actually haven't voted on this yet.
If you do.
Right.
I personally, we don't want to make this more complex than it currently stands as. And so the note to the members of the IS committee would be that they would need to come up with a budget solution to satisfy this requirement. And then from there, you guys can just start on that during budget time or make a supplemental or whatever you feel the committee feels appropriate.
There's the implementation piece
Sure.
of the rule piece, and that we shouldn't try to solve that in this piece of resolution. Those are two separate things. My question is, where does that work come from? Doesn't feel like it comes from JPS. Feels like it comes from IS. So that would be the recommendation, that we would ask the IS committee to put together the resolution for implementation. That doesn't sound right.
Request for finances.
Wouldn't have to go through PNF though, because if you're asking for either, so IS can do one of two things. They can wait until budget time, and then the department can give you that budget with their line item request, or you can move to do a supplemental and then have PNF approve that and bring it to the general board.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that correct?
I would say you shouldn't wait until October. I think what you need to do is
Yeah.
start moving on it sooner than later. And I'm sure Jennifer can comment on that.
Yeah, I mean, we already have costs, so we don't, I mean, we can't wait till budget time. You pass something that you need to now pay for this year.
Right, and work has already begun on trying to implement, so.
Yeah, I mean, budget time is too late. You've already done it and it's affecting this budget cycle.
So perhaps what we say, so how do we do this? I actually am going to look for advice here. How do we tell the IS committee to do an implementation against this existing rule?
One possible thing we can do is just simply refer this to the IS committee. And then the IS committee can pass it. And then from there, it can be passed to the county board with that cost structure in place. So that's how we can, proceed with it.
But if this is just the rule, if there's the cost structure just in the rule, I feel like that would have to be done as a supplemental, because I don't, and I just think that we don't include budgetary items.
My recommendation would be to go forward with this, with all the work you've done tonight.
Supervisor Eisen has something to say.
Yes, sorry, yes, Paul.
Are we still on item 10?
We are.
Okay. I have a problem with the IS committee version of resolution 5905-2022.
Okay.
The original resolution was submitted as correcting the resolution that was accepted as an amendment to the rules. This IS version, where it states unequivocally, shall be held in a hybrid mode. That's completely irrelevant to correcting what needed to be correct. That's changing the whole system of Zooming or recording. The object is to record the meetings, not necessarily to invite the public.
to the meeting.
We will.
Rule 2218 specifically, the IS version calls for all meetings to be hybrid. I submit that's not acceptable.
So this actually stayed in. So what he's talking about is something that we hadn't changed previously. We kept hybrid in. So I'm okay with him having this conversation since that doesn't actually impact any of the changes that have been made previously.
And the language hybrid mode is actually something that Director Francoeur added.
That's right. That's unacceptable.
Do you have are you proposing that we remove hybrid mode, Supervisor?
Absolutely. That completely changes the resolution. Our meetings are person to person to accommodate pandemic situations. They are Zoomed. This states that it has to be hybrid, which means Zoom and in person. I would like to see the Zoom fade out with or without the recordings.
Okay, so.
So what I say here is enough because I am under duress, if you can appreciate my computer went haywire. I'm back on the telephone, and I submit that held in a hybrid mode is unacceptable.
Okay, so I'm going to ask for a motion to remove held in a hybrid mode. And because you're.
So moved.
All right. Do we have a second? Okay, there's no second, so that motion does not proceed.
Now, I'll get my day in court on the county board floor.
So I will, I'm going to make a motion to approve resolution 59-052022.
As amended, yeah, with the as amended.
As amended. Oh, just read the.
With the changes that were made.
What the new motion is.
Okay, all right. So, resolution amends section 22.0, committee meetings of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting the section 22.
Speak louder so Supervisor Eisen can hear. Speak louder.
Sure. Whereas 22.11, all county board committees, commissions, and board meetings shall be held in a hybrid mode, in person and live streamed and recorded.
Yep.
And recorded. The live stream platform must include an option for the public to make a video appearance with speaking capabilities during the appropriate time for public comment. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors that it hereby amends section 22.00 of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.11.
Mr. Mills.
I think you missed.
Oh, and buildings.
Did you say all county board committee, commission, and board meetings in buildings
Okay.
shall be held in a hybrid mode, in person, and live streamed or digitally broadcasted and recorded. The live stream platform must include an option for the public to make a video appearance with speaking capabilities during the appropriate time for public comment. Now therefore be it resolved by the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors that it hereby amends section 22.0 of the rules of the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors by correcting section 22.11.
Yes. Do we have a second? Second. Okay. Okay. Any additional comments, questions? Okay, we're gonna go to a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed, nay. Okay, that motion passes.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. And so how do we communicate? I know I've said this many times, but I'm so sorry, it's not clear. How do we communicate to the IS committee then that they need to do this? Could JPS tell them that we need to do this?
I think there's two ways. I think when this comes up tomorrow or a week from tomorrow at county board, it can be addressed perhaps by you or any of your committee members. Or perhaps you could send a memo to the IS committee saying the committee has looked at this and basically made amendments that were required by the law. But there is the budgeting piece, because we do have to comply with public records. And that is a piece that has to be vetted in terms of the costs. And maybe Clerk Gerber might have some ideas too.
Well, I'm just thinking, anything that go to the county board, you need money, they want a reason why, and how to figure out the cost. I think it's got to come from the IS committee. They're the ones that can tell us how much storage will be. But I think that's even trying to figure out how much we're gonna have to store. So I think there's a lot to investigate to figure out before we can even come back and ask for a certain amount of money, right? I mean, I don't know Jennifer, how do you even start that?
Yeah, calculating storage is really, really, really difficult. I mean, until we have like a full month of meetings, then you could maybe take that and start doing some math. But until you have that, you don't know. And then we got one that was, like 5 gig and the next one was 1 gig. So, they're all different. So you really we could look at averages, but it is really, really hard to calculate storage when you have like no history or, there's so many unknowns there.
We have
27, including commissions.
27 and commissions.
They don't all meet every month, but
Yeah. And then that doesn't include if we want more like owl units or like checkout units, or what we have to do to some of the rooms to make spaces that work well, so there's other factors there as well that we haven't considered yet fully.
And a related piece to this, and one that I'm going to speak for Supervisor Isaac, because I know he had sent an email out asking about this, is I know that he is also expressing a desire to understand where we are in general with this. Beyond just the whole plan for implementation, it's what have we done so far? Where are we progressing? What's going on? Because we don't really know. And I really take his comments to heart. We don't really know. And there's a lot of great work that's been done. But I do believe that the county board should have some sort of update on where they are. Because, I don't think anyone really knows that we do have access to OWL, even maybe it's just 1 or 2. And that we've been doing this with a lot of the meetings so far, and not all of them, but a fair amount. And there's been good progress made in that way. So it would be nice to have an update from, I don't know who, if it was Patty or if it's.
I mean, I can speak a little now if you want, if you want to have that information.
Oh, no, we don't have to go through that right now. It's more of a communicating to the broader board, I think would be a benefit, is what I'm saying.
I can have Supervisor Gustafson give a department head update at the next county board meeting.
Yeah, that would be good.
I'll ask you to.
My other thought, and I'm gonna throw this out, I don't know if it's very popular, but, we still do minutes from the committee meetings, and, I know video streaming is very, but are we gonna be spending potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars for a very small group of people that want to go back and replay a video of a meeting? I mean, I understand the live streaming, if somebody can't get here physically, but if you, I mean, are we going down a path where we're having to record and retain all of these, like you said, we could be 7 years out, and how many people are really going to want to go back and look at that? We have minutes, we keep minutes of meetings and what we do. They're
Not
not
all
as
the time. That's
detailed.
a big part of the problem.
Well, by law, we have to keep minutes.
Well,
I
when it
don't-
comes to like the online educational things, we don't really do.
well,
And actually, our,
that would be a
the
committee
last
meeting.
information systems meeting that was recorded, that recording happened in December of 2021. We have no other meeting minutes.
Well, and again,
They
that,
were not taken.
okay, well, that is wrong. There should be
Well,
minutes,
right, so.
But what I'm saying is just, I mean, how much, what is the desire of the public? Is this really something that a lot of people want, or is it just a small? I don't know. I mean, it'd be nice to do an analysis of what is the demand for all of this before we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just throwing, I know it's not a popular comment, but I just.
Fair point to be made, though.
Yeah, so.
Okay. We're good.
Okay,
We're
sorry, I'm
good.
gonna go tuck my kids in.
Yeah, no, absolutely. For this, we're okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I think that what I will do is I will send a memo. You said I could do a memo to the committee, the IS committee, stating, I think it'll be school. And that is an update of where they are.
Only one.
Basically, something that's already been sent out to the department heads and some other people, but also to comment on the implementation piece of it, both short-term and long-term.
But, and I also think it would be a good idea at county board, when this comes up, to just advise the whole county board. Who sends a memo, because we need some answers.
So I'm gonna ask Chair Egan, when I introduce this resolution, that I'm given just a little bit of time to make sure that it's clear what we're talking about and all of that. That's fair, right? Oh. All right, okay. That is item 10. Item 11 is consideration vote for Jefferson County Resolution 2022-11, Price County Resolution 2022, and Vilas County Resolution 22-E, request state to revise the current real estate transfer fees revenue sharing formula. So this was presented at legislative and was referred back to JPS. I will say this much. It was real spotty when I listened to, when I was listening to the legislative. I didn't hear that that this was actually referred back to JPS at that committee meeting.
I wasn't there, I don't know the answer to that.
Do you recall?
What's that?
No, that's totally fine. Item 11. I just want to confirm that that was referred back to JPS at legislative.
Yes,
It was.
yes.
Okay. So I don't know if you all have had a chance to review those items, but essentially it's the formula that's used when it's collected, how much the state gets and how much we get. And the state gets, I'm extremely surprised. They definitely get the better share of the deal. Right, so there are counties, Jefferson, Price, and Vilas, who have said we want to review that sharing percentage. Find that. Okay, so here's a question from the newbie. There isn't a specific resolution from the county, our county, it's just these resolutions from the other counties. What am I doing with this?
So essentially, you ask your committee as to whether you want to have Winnebago County adopt essentially the Jefferson County or Price County and Vilas County resolutions, which are revising the current real estate transfer fee formula. Yeah, I don't know.
Sure, because I was for Chairman Egan, is there any reason why the state changed this in 81 to go from 50-50 to 80-20?
You think I'm older than I can tell you?
No, I was just wondering if there was any.
No, not in that way.
Do you remember this?
Was there any sort of policy background given as to why they did that?
No.
A little knowledge can be very dangerous.
Right. So I'm looking to the committee.
Honestly, it's the state always, one of the things I found in brief tenure is that the state does push a lot on the mandates onto counties. Ultimately, we are the business end for a lot of state statutes, state policy. See some chapter 59 there, we have to do in there. And because we're so constrained in the policy charge space, it would be nice, have a little more money. So I think this is.
Especially since that money is coming from the county.
Gets coming from the taxpayers of our county. We're buying homes and selling homes.
Versus that money going to Madison or Milwaukee County.
This, something like this would be perfect for a resolution to be brought to the Wisconsin Counties Association. However, it has to be adopted by the full county board in order for it to be eligible. And the due date is on Monday, the 20th, and our county board meeting is the 21st, day later, one day later. So I just wanted to make that note, but this would be something that's perfect for something like this because it is specifically in regards to county, to state statutes and county structure as well. So it just hopefully maybe the other counties like Price or Vilas or Jefferson did something and that'll be brought to the meeting in September. But I just wanted to make that note there that if we decide to put to it to vote today, it'll have to go to the county board, which will be next week, Tuesday, and it'll be one day later after the deadline for the counties association.
Yes.
Sometimes though, if you do that, you call down there, they will give you that, say, well, our meeting was just that, they'll give you that.
Oh.
Great for that. Not always, but sometimes they do.
Okay.
We just had something that went in for some of our supervisors that, had to be in. We said, well, we can't get it until the board or our committee meets and we let it go by and okay, so.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So it's an arbitrary.
Depending on which one you get. You gotta get a hold of the right one. No.
That's true. All right, so I'm looking to the committee to, yes,
I will go ahead. With a motion to adopt these resolutions from Price, Jefferson, and Vilas County. To adopt Jefferson County Resolution 2211, Price County Resolution 1222, and Vilas County Resolution 2215. Request the state to revise the current real estate transfer fees revenue formula.
do I hear a second? Any conversation?
I think that, maybe I'm nitpicking or maybe not, but I mean, we should maybe look at specifying that, to allow to state that we are supporting their resolution to retain 50% of all real estate transfer fees collected, with 50% remitted to the state. Just to be specific, that we are in support of their resolution. And then I will make a motion to say that be it further resolved that a copy of this resolution be sent to Governor County Evers, all members of the state legislature representing Winnebago County, the Wisconsin Counties Association, and all other Wisconsin counties.
And that's in the actual language there.
Yep, yeah, just mimicking what Price County had for theirs.
Okay, but we can't actually do that quite yet. Oh, no, we're in discussion, so you are making
An additional
amendment to, okay, got it,
Yep.
okay. And you're gonna second that. Any discussion on that amendment? Okay, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay? Here's. So now we're back to the whole question, correct? Any other feedback? One, and it's just a question more than anything else. Is it easier for people?
I have discussion.
Okay. I will.
The Winnebago County Board is a nonpartisan organization. This resolution is a partisan resolution. It has no place for the county board to consider a referendum.
Okay, got it. That's good. Paul, we're not on that yet. We're on item 11, which is Jefferson County Resolution 2022-11, Price County Resolution. We're on the one before that. We haven't gotten to.
Yeah, did Mrs. Strohmeyer comment on that? For Register of Deeds, since those were Register of Deeds issues?
She left. And she didn't.
Well, you missed a perfect opportunity to get it straight from the Register of Deeds, just what the value is. I do support that resolution as it came through.
Okay. So why don't we vote? Well, actually, no, I do want to just make one question. Is it bringing this forward? Is it one county versus for all of each county? Are you confusing the question?
In the past, when we've seen resolutions from other counties, essentially, your county replaces Price County. So in response, but again, I'm not in Madison, but what I've seen is numerous counties filing the same resolution and submitting it to Madison.
Okay.
So in other words, we just replace the committee so decided violence with Winnebago County.
Okay. But we don't have to make that discussion in that decision.
Well, if you want this to be addressed next Tuesday,
So that we should, that's the one that we, what you're saying.
that's right.
One of them.
You think Winnebago County, or what?
One of these, and we replace it with Winnebago County.
Yes, that's correct.
That's what I'm asking, because right now we have one, and we say, now we're below it. So which one?
May I point out, when they talk about the various dollars, since this has to be sent out by 10 o'clock tomorrow morning, we may not have the actual dollar amounts of real estate transfer fees collected over the past 5 years. But we're specific dollar amounts in.
Okay. So what do we think? Which county? Which resolution?
I think Jefferson is the county that is closest in size to us. If we're just gonna go off of that, I think it would probably be the most germane because Price and Violet are both smaller than Winnebago County. I think Jefferson is the most accurate. If we need something to bear it on, I would do it on that.
Okay. All right.
That works.
So I'm gonna, I can't. Someone needs to make a motion to select that one to bring forward.
Motion to bring forward Jefferson County Resolution 22-11.
To adopt that. Do I have a second? Okay, second. Any discussion? Okay, so what we're voting on is taking Jefferson counties, of the three that we had, Jefferson County as the one that we would advance forward to the county board for consideration. Okay, that's what we're gonna do. Those in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. That passes. Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Agenda item 12, I submitted, I specifically remember submitting as a discussion item and not a consideration. Do that, it says on the agenda item report discussion, specifically remember in my email, it's saying discussion.
Yep, you know what it did, and for some reason it. All right. So I'm gonna make that change. Agenda item 12 is not consideration vote, it is discussion of a resolution, to provide for and add an advisory referendum on voting equity for the November 8th, 2022 general election in Winnebago County.
So I got an email from the clerk's office. If you go to the back side, second page, backside of the policy discussion about the $3,000 cost. Turning out type B and C notices, supposed to be getting on the ballot. According to interim finance director Collard and Clerk Gertner, fortunately she left before we get here, there probably will not be space in the current budget to cover for that. Because we didn't have a countywide spring primary, but we did have a number of other primaries throughout the county that did take up some of the printing budget for that. And given that that's the question, personally, now that that's the development that I am now aware of, not necessarily sure if this is worth $3,000 a day. I'm gonna put a caveat there. I do feel strongly about this subject, but probably not enough to put $3,000 into it as a development. And as also Supervisor Eisen mentioned, there is a bit of a partisan tilt to it. So as a result, I think this is something that should be discussed, but again, spending money on it is probably not something really supported. So I care, but not TLDR. I care, but not enough to spend money on it, right? So it's plus I know advisory referendums can be. This board has tried advisory referendums in the past, and it has had some bit of a back and forth about how they've gone. Basically, the Constitutional Authority Clause that, and I used to work with Joe Hampton in the legislature, who works at Common Sense, Wisconsin. He basically said that this would be a good idea to add to the ballot. I think it's an interesting topic, but to the nature of advisory referendums overall, I think the intent of them can be, the legislature will sit down and they say, the reality of it is that constitutional amendments are very hard to make. They are very difficult to put together. they're painstakingly, a lot of painstaking process. So that's kind of where I will put this, given the cost. I got the cost note after I submitted it to the agenda, so that has been kind of an issue with that. Like I said, I'm not willing to support something that will cost an extra $3,000. I just saw it can be avoided. But the spirit of the item there is mostly for access equity for rural areas as well, specifically with SD loading times. I know that folks in rural townships and smaller villages don't necessarily have the staff to go ahead and get, those people there at the same hours that an urban center may be able to. So that was mostly the intent. But given the money factor, I would probably not pursue this any further. But it was interesting to do the research. Yeah.
Okay. I think that, maybe it just as another idea too, I mean, instead of putting it as a referendum, which could possibly cost money, have something be presented to the Wisconsin Counties Association. I don't think there would be that any cost savings involved there, or at least nowhere near 30,000. And that's something that would be privy to that organization too. And not only that, but you may be able to talk to other counties that have rural areas too, and get them on board with you. So that would be my only suggestion.
Okay. Any other discussion on agenda item 12? Okay, we're going to close item 12. Next meeting dates, item 14, Monday, July 11th, at 6 p.m. The one thing that I'm going to be adding going forward is also an idea of the deadline for that meeting as well for submittal. Just so it's clear that this is kind of the cutoff point for submittals, just so we're all aware going in. That way we hopefully try to avoid doing a lot of last minute changes for such. So the deadline for the agenda items will be due July 5th by 10 a.m. to allow proper working of the agenda specifically. All right. Drawing a blank. Do I need to do a motion for the meeting? I don't do. No, that's just what the meeting is, right? Yeah. All right, cool. All righty. With that, I'm looking for
Second.
All right. Any discussion? Nope. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed? All right, that passes. All righty.